The dark side of the divine. These haunted churches have been said to be cursed by the devil himself. Starting off with the cursed chapel of the damned. Now, St. Mary's Church in England, St. Mary's Church in the small village of Botsford, England, is a place of dark legend. According to local lore, the church is haunted by the ghost of a young girl who was brutally unalived by a satanic cult in the 17th century. Visitors to the church have reported strange occurrences, including unexplained noises, moving shadows, and an intense feeling of dread. Local resident Sarah Jenkins had said once, "I've been visiting St. Mary's for years, and I've always felt a sense of unease, but one night I saw a ghostly figure of a young girl standing in the pews. It was like nothing I've ever seen before." Now, the Witches of Belvoir is one of the most famous tales of English witchcraft here. In the early 1600s, Joan Flower lived in Botsford with her two daughters, Philippa and Margaret, who worked as servants for the Earl of Rutland at Belvoir Castle. Now, unpopular in their community and distrusted by the rest of the staff at the castle, the sisters were dismissed actually for stealing. Now, according to local legend, the Flower woman swore revenge on the Earl and attacked his two sons and heirs to basically the earldom of witchcraft. Now, the story is immortalized in Botsford local church. The Earl's tomb, which lies inside the building, commemorates the unusual passing of the two boys, noting both of them perished in their infancy by wicked practices and sorcery. To this day, St. Mary's Church in Botsford hosts the only known tomb in England to determine witchcraft as the cause of passing. The Devil's Playground, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. Now, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City is one of the largest cathedrals in the world, but despite its grandeur, the cathedral has a very dark history of paranormal activity. According to reports, the cathedral is haunted by the ghost of a former priest who made a pact with the devil. A visitor named Mark Davis said, "I was exploring the cathedral one night when I heard strange noises coming from the crypt. I went down to investigate and saw a figure in a priest's robe standing in the shadows. It was like he was watching me." A guide to the cathedral from 1921 suggested that it might take 700 years for the cathedral to actually be completed, since it was built by employing true Gothic building methods. However, as of right now, it appears that the cathedral will never be completed. A temporary ceiling consisting of tiles is still in place, a century after it was supposed to be demolished so that the cathedral spire could basically rise. Now, St. John the Divine claims to be the largest cathedral in the world, defined as a church that is also the seat of a bishop. Measured by length or internal volume, it is one of the 5 largest church buildings in the entire world. Additionally, it possesses the largest rose window in the United States. The window, which is the 5th largest in the world, was constructed out of 10,000 pieces of stained glass. Just south of the cathedral lies its 11.3-acre close or campus. Visitors can actually stroll through the garden where the different plants and all species mentioned in the Bible. One of the close highlights, is the Peace Fountain, which is designed in 1985 by Greg Wyatt. The fountain was created to mark the 200th anniversary of the Diocese of New York. Now, it depicts the Archangel Michael embracing one of the 9 giraffes after his defeat of Satan. The Haunted Hermitage, the Chapel of the Holy Spirit, which is located in France. Now, the Chapel of the Holy Spirit in the French countryside is a small, isolated church that's said to be haunted by the ghost of a former monk. According to local legend, the monk made a pact with the devil in exchange for spiritual enlightenment. A local resident, Pierre Dupont, said, "I've been visiting the chapel for years. I've always felt a sense of peace, but one night I saw a ghostly figure of a monk standing in the hallway. It was like he was trying to communicate with me." Now, the chapel in Rue, built between 1440 and 1515, is a major example of Gothic, flamboyant Picard art. Now, the Chapel of the Holy Spirit is located in the city center on a hill and is listed in the supplementary inventory of historic monuments. It was previously known as the Chapel of the Lennox Hospital before it actually moved in 1981. According to local legend, Brother Etienne was a devout monk who basically lived in the chapel during the 17th century. Etienne was was known for his extreme devotion and his dedication to the church. However, as time went on, Etienne became increasingly disillusioned with the church and its teachings. One night, Etienne made a pact with the devil in exchange for spiritual enlightenment and a lot of power. The devil granted Etienne's wish, but at a terrible cost. Etienne's body began to wither away, and he became consumed by an intense feeling of darkness and despair. Now, several paranormal investigation teams have visited the chapel, and many have reported strange occurrences. Some have captured evidence of ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises. A paranormal investigator named Marie Martin said, "We investigate the chapel and captured some compelling evidence of paranormal activity. We believe that Etienne's ghost is still trapped in the chapel and that his pact with the devil has cursed the place." St. Mary's Church, located in Clophill, England, and better known as Satan's Ruins. In the sleepy village of Clophill lies a ruined church that has become infamous for ritualistic black masses and grave desecrations. Now, in 1963, vandals broke into St. Mary's Church, exhumed corpses from the graveyard, and arranged human remains in occult symbols. It shocked the nation, and believe it or not, that was just the beginning. Since then, paranormal investigators have documented seeing glowing orbs, shadow figures moving among the tombstones, and cold winds sweeping through on calm nights. One psychic claimed the site radiates pure malevolence. Local legend says a secret underground chamber beneath the altars where initiations into satanic cults took place, and some claim it's actually still used today. The kicker? Phone and camera batteries reportedly drain instantly when you try to record there at night, so if you visit, be sure to pack a portable charger with you. The Church of the Nine Ghosts in the Philippines, known as the Possessed Parish. This one is hidden in the jungle outside Quezon and is a crumbling stone church locals call Simbahan Siam Namulto, which is the Church of Nine Ghosts. It's said to be haunted by 9 priests who were unalive during World War II. The church is now abandoned, yet travelers swear they've seen ghostly robbed men lined up in the pews just silently watching. Creepy, right? One backpacker took photos and later found 9 blurred figures behind her in every single image, and that's despite her being alone. There's even an audio recording where a woman's voice whispers "Bumalik ka," which is Filipino for "come back." Paranormal groups that investigated the scene reported sudden nausea, burns on their skin, and full body apparitions. Now, many refused to return there, so with that in mind, my recommendation is to not go. Old St. George's Church in the Czech Republic. Now, this one is known as the Living Statues. In 1968, the ceiling collapsed mid-service at Old St. George's Church in Lakova. Now, that incident sparked whispers of a curse, and eventually the building was actually just left to rot. Now, years later, an artist installed dozens of ghostly statues resembling mourners frozen in prayer, but visitors that go say the statues actually move. Some turn their heads, others disappear entirely, only to reappear the next day in a completely different pose. Tourists report extreme chills, phantom voices reciting Latin prayers, and sensations of being watched from inside the pulpit. One woman who went actually fainted while standing amongst the statues and claimed she saw the face of her deceased mother in one of them. That's just terrifying. Our Lady of the Angels Cathedral, located in Los Angeles, and this one is known as the Screaming Sanctuary. LA's massive Our Lady of the Angels Cathedral was actually built in 2002, so not that long ago, but beneath it lies the site of a 19th century cemetery. Now, during construction, workers uncovered human remains, and ever since, whispers of strange phenomena have followed the church. A priest actually reported that the confessional booths shake violently at night. One security guard actually quit after seeing a woman in a veil walk through a locked glass door, whispering, "You buried me wrong." And during a 2014 midnight mass, a live microphone picked up a scream that none of the people there could actually hear in person. Only those listening online heard it. Audio engineers couldn't explain it either, so it's still a mystery. But the Vatican sent an inquiry the next month, and even still, nada. So visit at your own risk, but report back if you do and let me know how that goes. The Cursed Congregation, the First Baptist Church located in Texas. Now, the First Baptist Church in the small town of Sutherland Springs, Texas, is a place of dark legend. According to local lore, the church is haunted by the ghost of a former pastor who is possessed by the devil. A former congregant, Emily Wilson, said, "I was attending a service at the church when I saw the pastor's eyes turn black. It was like he was possessed by something evil. I've never been back to that church again," of course. The First Baptist Church in Texas, particularly the one in Sutherland Springs, became infamous for the 2017 mass attack, leaving first responders and the community haunted by the horror of the event. On November 5th, 2017, a man launched an attack with a fatal weapon at First Baptist Church, fatally hitting 26 people and injuring 20 others. Now, the horrific nature of the carnage left first responders deeply affected, struggling with the trauma and the overwhelming scene. Now, the church, however, is cursed and has a long history dating back to the 19th century, and it's said to be haunted by the ghost of a former pastor who was possessed by the devil. Now, according to the local lore, Pastor Johnson was a very charismatic and influential figure in the church during the early 20th century. However, Johnson's behavior became increasingly erratic and bizarre, and many believe that he was possessed by the devil. One night, Johnson's behavior became so erratic that he was locked in the church's basement. But the next morning, Johnson was found in the pulpit, his eyes black as coal, and his voice changed to a deep, raspy tone. After Johnson's possession, strange occurrences began to happen in the church. Members of the congregation reported hearing noises, ghostly apparitions were seen, and experiencing intense feelings of just fear and dread. Now, many believe that Johnson's possession had cursed the church and that his ghost was still trapped there. The Devil's Domain, the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Now, the cathedral in Spain is one of the most famous pilgrimage sites in the world, but despite its sacred significance, the cathedral has a dark history of paranormal activity. According to reports, the cathedral is haunted by the ghost of a former priest who made a deal with the devil. A visitor named Maria Rodriguez said, "I was visiting the cathedral when I saw a ghostly figure of a priest standing in the sanctuary. It was like he was trying to warn me of something." Now, at night, when the lights of the city are on, a shadow of, a pilgrim is said to appear on the wall of the cathedral. The story goes that a priest who was in love with a nun from the San Pao convent would meet her secretly in a passage under the stairs. One night, the priest asked the nun to run away with him, but she never came. She just didn't show up. The priest returned and waited in anguish for his love, dressed as a pilgrim, and has been waiting every night since. That's heartbreaking. You can find the shadow in the deep corner between the base of the clock tower and the royal door, behind a low fence next to the lighting pillar. There are other versions of this story, of course, including one actually about a criminal who was ordered to make a pilgrimage to Santiago to redeem his sins, but instead became involved in just more crimes. The first myth tells that this shadow is the soul of a criminal who was trapped in the cathedral. It states that a 15th century French nobleman was convicted of unaliving his father out of greed. To redeem his sins, he was ordered to make a pilgrimage to Santiago. However, far from, repenting and purifying himself, during his journey, he became involved in several conflicts that culminated in the assassination of 2 young men. When he arrived in the city exhausted and with no place to rest, he decided to sleep at the doors of the cathedral. Around midnight, though, the ghost of his father appeared to him to forgive him for unaliving him, but told him that he must pay for the demise of the 2 pilgrims. Therefore, he condemned the Frenchman to wait eternally in the Quintana until their souls reached and finished their journey. Borgvattnet Church in Sweden. This one has a pastor that never left, reportedly. Now, the Borgvattnet Church in northern Sweden is so haunted, it was actually converted into a hotel for ghost hunters. Built in 1876, the rectory was home to many pastors who all reported violent poltergeist activity, and one claimed he was even thrown from his chair by invisible hands. Visitors who go here hear crying babies, doors slam on their own, and chairs that are rocking by themselves. Now, a photo from 1981 reportedly shows a woman in 19th century clothing floating in a hallway. Now, if you stay the night, you're actually given a certificate, but most don't actually make it until dawn. So one woman locked herself in the bathroom for hours, saying something was trying to crawl into her body. So you literally get a certificate if you make it. It's kind of like when a burger joint gives you a prize if you finish finish their like 20-pound burger in 30 minutes. Honestly, I love a good challenge. This one seems worth it to try. I mean, I'm not gonna go, but you go and come back and tell me if you made it. We'll be waiting. Stull Church in Kansas, USA, which is also known as the Devil's Gateway. Now, the Stull Cemetery and church are so feared, some locals won't actually say its name out loud. Legend says a hidden staircase beneath the church ruins leads directly to hell, and that the devil himself rises there twice a year, once on Halloween and once on the spring equinox. Now, the church was mysteriously torn down in the 90s at some point, but stories persist. Visitors have seen hooded figures appear behind gravestones and then just vanish. Electronics fail instantly, and one woman claims her unborn baby stopped kicking in her belly during her visit and only resumed movement when they actually left the grounds. So that's creepy. Even Pope John Paul II reportedly diverted his plane around Kansas to actually avoid flying over Stull. So yeah, this one is a no for me. I'm good. Notre Dame de la Garde in Marseille, France. Now, this is the Church of Unanswered Prayers. Known as the protector of sailors, this basilica in Marseille has a dark undercurrent. During storms, prayers are basically offered here to keep boats safe, but locals say if your prayer is rejected, you'll know instantly. Several fishermen have gone missing at sea after visiting the church and reportedly mocking its sacredness. Now, inside, people have heard whispers in Italian or Latin despite no one being nearby. A journalist caught a photo of what looks like a black shadow with horns looming in the upper gallery. Some visitors describe being overcome with grief and dread despite, entering feeling completely normal. Locals say the church knows who you are and what you've done. I don't need my dirty laundry aired out, so I'm gonna pass on this one. Poveglia Island Church in Italy. Now, this is the island of no return, as you know. Now, off the coast of Venice lies Poveglia Island, once a quarantine zone for plague victims and later home to an asylum. The island has a crumbling church where the bell tower still rings, even though the bell was removed years ago. Legend says a doctor who basically tormented patients threw himself from the tower after claiming he was being dragged to hell by ghosts. His body was never recovered. No one lives there now. Locals say if you try to set foot on the island, you'll never feel clean again, whatever that means. And some believe the church was never holy to begin with, only built to hide the evil beneath it. Churches are meant to be places of peace, right? Forgiveness and light, but these are the ones where the light no longer reaches. Whether cursed, abandoned, destroyed, each of these churches have become something else entirely, maybe even gates to hell.
What better place to start today's list than an old abbey? Specifically, Roche Abbey is a now-ruined abbey in the civil parish of Maltby, Rotherham, South Yorkshire, England. If I mispronounced any of that, I apologize, I tried. It is in the valley of Maltby Beck and is administered by English Heritage. It's also listed in the National Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. The abbey was founded in 1147 when the stone buildings were raised on the north side of the beck. The co-founders of Roche were Richard de Bussley, likely the great-nephew of the first Roger de Bussley, the Norman magnate builder of Tickhill Castle, and Richard Fitzgerald. When the monks first arrived in South Yorkshire from Newminster Abbey in Northumberland, they chose the most suitable site of the stream that runs through the valley to build their new Cistercian monastery. 25 years later, at the end of the century, the Norman Gothic Great Church, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, had been finished, as well as most of the other buildings. The control of the abbeys was vested in the de Vesci family, lords of Rotherham, who in turn subfeuded the land to Richard Fitzgerald, Lord of Wickersley. From the start, the Abbey of Roche, built for the so-called white monks, as the Cistercians were known, had an almost otherworldly air. It was, after all, built at the northern end of an area once owned by Sherwood Forest, and it was said that Robin Hood went to mass here. At its height, it supported a community of around 175 men, of whom around 60 were choir monks, and the remainder being lay brothers. A Cistercian innovation. Eventually, on the death of the co-founder Fitzgerald, control of the abbey passed to his son Roger, now de Wickersley, and then eventually to a granddaughter, Constantia, who married William de Levitt, a family of Norman origin who were the lords of the nearby village of Houghton Levitt. The abbey continued in the Levitt family until 1377, when John Levitt sold his rights in the abbey to the London merchant Richard Barry. By the time of the dissolution, full control of Roche Abbey was held by Henry Clifford, 2nd Earl of Cumberland, who came in for numerous grants at the dissolution, as he was married to the niece of King Henry VIII. Back in 2021, members of the Conisbrough Paranormal Research Association were adamant that they had spotted a spooky monk at the old abbey. Dean, age 38, from Conisbrough, said that they had been up there taking photos, and the most interesting one was near the first gatehouse. They had found that one of the pictures, which had showed a monk from the chest up with an orb, like a ball of energy, and the photo showed the outline of his head and a hood. Now, they were still going through the photographs at the time of the articles because they took up to 1,000, but they were pretty sure it was a monk that would have lived there in the 12th century when it was still an abbey. So the footage we have today was from the Haunted Finders channel here on YouTube, where a group of investigators had their equipment pick up a lot of spirits still kicking around on the grounds. Time to move over to Ness Church for a little change of pace, and maybe I won't bungle up as many words. Eerily surrounded by gigantic fields, this church is so rural that Google Street View didn't even have documentation of it by 2019. Hell, as of the time of my recording of this, they still don't have a Street View option. There are other roads nearby that have been covered, but nowhere near the church. Like we got like here, the church is over here, none of this. If that isn't ominous enough, I don't know what is. Originally organized as the Norwegian Evangelical St. Johan's Congregation of Meeker and surrounding counties in 1861, Ness Church, located in Litchfield, Minnesota, is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the state. This tiny country church is said to be haunted by the spirits of settlers killed during the Sioux uprising of the 1860s. In the nearby town of Acton, a handful of young locals shot and killed 5 settlers, including a woman and her daughter, and all 5 are buried there. The incident sparked a violent conflict that ended with a mass execution of 38 Dakota residents in Mankato, a dark chapter in Minnesota's history. Some folks have reported the lights of the church come on by themselves and apparitions spotted on the premises. Avid ghost hunters frequent the grounds, and back in 2015, there was actually an instance of 4 people breaking into the church and being charged with felony burglary and criminal damage to property. Church officials tried to curb the trespassing and unwanted break-ins by offering guided tours. The video in question today seems to show an apparition caught on camera. You let me know what you think in the comments. Back to abbeys we go, with Kirkstall Abbey next up on the docket. The picturesque ruins have been drawn and painted by artists such as J.M.W. Turner, Thomas Girton, and John Sell Cotman. Kirkstall Abbey was acquired by the Leeds Corporation as a gift from Colonel North and opened to the public in the late 19th century. The gatehouse became a museum, which is now part of the Leeds Museums and Galleries group. The English houses, of which there are remains at Fountains, Rievaulx, Kirkstall, Tintern, and Netley, were mainly arranged after the same plan, with slight local variations. Situated just outside of Leeds, Kirkstall Abbey still stands to its full height and for centuries offered a peaceful existence for the monks who lived and worked there. However, daily life could be harsh, and like any community, it was not immune to intrigue and mystery as religion developed. With over 800 years of history, this abbey attracts many visitors and is considered one of the oldest attractions in the region. During the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII, this abbey was emptied and its remains were left behind. Now, after that dissolution, sightings of ghosts have become common, and by the 19th century there were reports of ghostly apparitions in the nave of the church. One witness claimed to have seen a funeral procession of somber men, clad in white, proceeding slowly. Now, the abbey is also famous for its repeated haunting manifestation of a former abbot that walks around the building that has now been converted to the Abbey House Museum, although you're more likely to hear him moving around than you are to see him. Some also believe that there is a mad monk who haunts the abbey after his brother was killed by highwaymen on his way back from the Fountains Abbey, which is another abbey in Yorkshire. Mad with guilt and despair, he began carving his brother's initials into the abbey grounds that can apparently still be seen in small bench nooks around the ruins even now, and he continues to walk around the abbey to this day. Our next church might be a little obvious, but St. Michael's over in Chernobyl shouldn't really be on anybody's must-see list. It's about 5 miles from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant complex and 3 miles from the border of Belarus. It's in the abandoned vision of Krasny. It is located on the left bank of the Pripyat River and was previously part of the Red Chernobyl area, near the center of the village of Krasny. So this is the Russian Orthodox Church, St. Michael's. It was built in 1800. It's encompassed by iron gates decorated with a cross and diamond motifs, and it's about 215 years old, and shockingly, apparently it's not as dilapidated as one might imagine. The peeling, thick, white painted exterior, the 8-foot-tall mustard-toned oak doors, the blue and green paint, hand-carved details and embellishments, and it's also topped off with not 1 but 2 beautiful copper classic onion turrets. And this all rises in the most beautiful, regal, colorful contrast amidst what is now a forest. Officially, St. Michael's has not been used in decades, but it's still, I guess, in good condition. After viewing so many buildings that have become ruins, one can only look at this fascinating structure and imagine its future. The pews have all been removed, and separate several of the decorative wall coverings have shed and paintings have disappeared. In the nave, a menumalia, or candle stand, and iconostasis, icon stand, are still poised and at the center of attention. Accompanying these staples of a traditional Russian Orthodox church, there is a small table where people come to leave offerings. Now, unless you want to burn whatever you're wearing after your visit, this isn't the church you want to spend time at. Now, this next church has a name that's kind of deceiving: the Chapel of Ease. If one were to travel along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard on St. Helena Island, shortly before you reach the Hanging Tree, off to the left you will find the ruins of an old church, what is known in the area as the Chapel of Ease. This chapel was built to serve the population of the area, since where everything was at the time, it was too far away from the parish church in Beaufort to attend Sunday services. Building of the chapel commenced in about 1740 using tabby construction materials. The St. Helena Chapel of Ease was ideally situated for the planters of the island. By 1812, it had been granted the designation of parish church. Then on November 4th of 1861, Sunday services were interrupted by a messenger who brought news of the impending invasion of nearby Beaufort by Union troops to a Captain William Oliver Perry Fripp. Fripp's ancestors had been designated to maintain the building and upkeep the chapel, as John Fripp III had left £500 for the purpose in 1780. A year earlier, Edgar Fripp and his wife Eliza had taken their place in a mausoleum built for them in the adjacent graveyard back in 1852. Built by Charleston stonecutter W.T. White, it remains on the property today and seems to still be in good condition. According to a diary written by Thomas B. Chaplin on April 13th of 1852, said vault was a fine affair and did not have to wait very long for its occupants. The Yankees broke it open during the war, hoping for treasure, so it's somewhat out of order, but to this day it still looks cute. The chapel was destroyed in a horrendous fire that happened after the Civil War. Now today, the ruins in the graveyard remain. The vault still remains out of order though. The planters left St. Helena with the arrival of Union forces in 1861, and the church never regained its stature. Some stories relate that Union soldiers used it for services during the war, as well as Northerners who came to the area after the war to educate the local population. The door of the vault was ruined by the soldiers, and at some point it was decided to brick up the entrance. According to the story, the workmen did a very good job of sealing the vault, only to return the following day to find bricks removed and neatly stacked beside the mausoleum. This occurred many times. Convinced that the supernatural was at work, the job remained unfinished. Local authorities had assured that nobody had been in the area the previous night long enough to complete such a task. So today, the vault remains empty. The door is half sealed by bricks. One might find the experience of looking into the vacant vault more than a bit unsettling, if not downright eerie. Oh right, here's the part you've been waiting oh so patiently for. People have witnessed a great number of ghostly occurrences on the grounds. Some folks have reported strange sensations when walking through the church's graveyard, which, no kidding. Visitors have seen apparitions of people dressed in 18th century clothing. Others have seen the ghost of a lady in white that carries a young human through the graveyard. I love a good lady in white. Many also report hearing whispered prayers or singing coming from the interior of the chapel. And yet others claim to have heard names being shouted in the silent burial ground and in the surrounding woods. With such a mingled heritage and bloodline, coupled with about 5 centuries of history to feed it, it's surprising that the ghosts don't outnumber the living in the thick air of the Sea Islands. Or maybe they do. And finally, we're ending our time today with l'Abbaye de Mortem, or Mortimer Abbey. For over 80 years, Mortimer has stood as a haunted haven, a landscape woven with the threads of tales and specters. The Garage, a wolf woman, made her initial spectral appearance in 1884. And there's Mathilde, the ethereal white lady, once a woman and now a dream haunting the corridors of the abbey. The ghosts of 4 monks, their lives extinguished during the tumultuous times of the Revolution, echo through the ages. Despite the skepticism of many, rumors persist, like, they do. The abbey underwent an exorcism in 1921 in an attempt to dispel the otherworldly energies that seemed to cling to its stones. Jacqueline Charpentier Café, the present guardian, stands as a bastion of reasons in a landscape often clouded by spectral whispers. Witnesses add layers to Mortimer's enigma. A guide with a trace of northern accent claimed a mystical connection to the abbey when a hairpin was cast into St. Catherine's source. A year later, she returned with her husband, the hairpin's allure transcending the mundane. Another solitary witness, tasked with a job within the abbey's walls, heard phantom footsteps echoing through its halls. A slow, deliberate gait that left an indelible mark on the witness's psyche, shrouding the abbey in an aura of disquiet. There was a painter from Lissors, a connoisseur of heraldry and coat of arms, refrained from returning to Mortimer after years of collaboration with his former landlord, now deceased. What mysterious revelations had she encountered in her artistic sojourns within the abbey's walls? The answer, like the mist that blankets the morning, remains elusive. The Cistercian monks, the ones I mentioned a moment ago, who once inhabited the abbey, sought, simplicity, nothing crazy, no luxuries. But they have a heated chapel behind the pantry. That kinda doesn't make sense with their vows. A peculiar warmth persists in that space, unaffected by the harsh winter outside, a subtle defiance of the laws of nature. Oh, by the way, in the winter, snow doesn't stick around to this location. Vegetation grows very early, and a true well-being emanates from there inexplicably. Also, Mortimer resists any kind of excavation attempts, as if guarded by the unseen forces that haunt its grounds. Prohibitions of the past, such as curtailing weddings and banquets by 2 a.m, still are in place today. The spirits also mess with the phone lines, and so much more, to the point where it's no surprise to me why why priests wouldn't really want to frequent this place of worship.
Number 5. St. Mary the Virgin Church. Clop Hill, England. I gotta say, that sounds like it's a fake place, like where Sir Topham Hatt lives. Well, not only is it real, but it's home to a bone-chilling haunted church, St. Mary the Virgin Church. Now, St. Mary was built in 1350 outside the main settlement of totally real place Clop Hill. Traditionally, churches are built facing the east. I didn't know that. It's so it can align with the sun rising, which in Christianity is associated with heaven and the Messiah. Churches have their altars facing east, so you pray in that holy direction. Well, St. Mary's just had to be a little different, and this church is facing the west, facing away from God. And it's why some people believe the church is hosted to evil spirits, as facing west means they've shunned God and opened their doors to the devil. Paranormal investigators have strongly suspected the church as being host to satanic rituals. As the church fell into disuse, it became a popular spot for vandals, and if you believe the legends, black magic. In 1963, a local couple saw 2 people wandering around holding a human skull, which definitely I think would cause you to look twice. The people told the couple that they had found the skull in St. Mary's, where it had been jammed into a wall. When the couple went to investigate, they found on the floor a breastbone, pelvis, and leg bones, all laid out in a pattern used for black mass. Pretty spooky. Scattered cockerel feathers and tracings of 2 crosses filled in red were found inside the church as well. And as if that wasn't slightly unnerving enough, they also found that 6 graves of women in particular had been tampered with as well. All signs seem to be pointing towards some dark rituals happening at St. Mary's Church. Common sightings at the St. Mary's Church range from smaller scale things like strange screeching during the night or hearing the bell going off despite being long abandoned, and the more threatening reports seeing tall, dark figures wandering the ruins of the church, perhaps getting themselves ready for another ritual, or perhaps they've been contacted by a ritual and are arriving. Only thing I know is I won't be checking out the midnight mass there anytime soon. And if you're interested in way more scary stories of all manners, cryptids, conspiracies, churches, hauntings, aliens, we've got a little bit of everything at Top 5 Scary. So click on through, find something to get cozy with, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell so you catch all of our videos as they drop. But do all that stuff at the end of this one, okay? Because we got way more haunted churches for you coming right up. Number 4. Our next entry on the list today is going to be the Aquia Episcopal Church. And if you haven't said that, try saying that 10 times fast. I dare you. Located in picturesque Stafford, Virginia. The church has 200 years of history to it, which means it's also got approximately 200 years worth of ghost stories to study. When the church was first built way back when in the 18th century, it was stained by an unfortunate tragedy. You see, the surrounding areas were exhausted by war and the lack of resources, food, and money, and as such, brigands would take to the dark country roads to attack innocents during the night for whatever they had on them. Well, one young woman was hiding from a gang of highwaymen and marauders and sought out the church as a safe haven. Unfortunately, the bandits eventually caught up with her and she met an untimely end. Now, these men were never caught for their crime, and her body was not found for hundreds of years, left there to rot and decompose. And many believe that because of this, her spirit is tied to the church. And there have been several reports of hauntings ever since the discovery of those accursed bones. Visitors mention hearing footsteps frantically scattered around at night. These footsteps break into a run, but if you go searching, you'll never be able to find anyone attached to them. Voices can be heard in the room where she was attacked, some saying it sounds like a call for help or a painful scream of a struggle. Some go so far as to say they saw a transparent apparition of the woman in the church's windows or on the balcony. One story comes to us from a custodian who worked the graveyard shift there in the 1990s, claiming that he saw a ghostly woman's face floating above the graces, and says that he saw her smiling at him through the balcony windows before she vanished. One last one on this church. In the 1990s, to celebrate the bicentennial anniversary, the church sent out an invitation to a group of Civil War reenactors to fight a mock battle on its ground. During the night, one of the reenactors was complaining that there was a red and orange light that was flickering the entire night during the church that prevented him from sleeping. The man explained this to the father of the church, and the father explained back that there was no electricity in the vestry, and that the light must have been the spirit confused by why the Civil War had started up again. Imagine, you're a ghost, you're already out of time, and then you look outside and you see guys from your time? My little ghostly sense of the world would be so thrown off. I would have to buy a new ghost calendar.
So technically this next place isn't a church, but it's a religious building, and that counts in my book. Time to check out the old Ursuline Convent in New Orleans. which is a classic place for all things weird and ooky spooky. The Ursulines have been in Louisiana since the early 1700s and have inhabited a series of buildings up to the present day while working with schools, charities, and orphanages. Apparently back in the 1720s, the French government sent young ladies to their settlements in America as prospective wives for the settlers there. It makes sense. The mesdemoiselles arrived with their belongings in chests or casquettes and took up residence with the nuns until they could find husbands. According to legend though, they weren't carrying the usual possessions one would find in the luggage of a group of girls at the time. No dresses, books, shoes, money, iPods, no hair ribbons, no brushes. No, these young ladies were carrying vampires. Yeah, vampires in their luggage. Good thing this was in the 1700s because there's no way the TSA would let vampires get through security anymore. They're so strict about what you can bring on planes these days. No liquids in containers greater than 3 ounces, no sharp objects, no aerosol cans, and no undead monsters. Ugh. And here I was hoping to bring a vampire back when I go to the States in a couple of months. Anyways, the legend suggests that the girls were permanently locked in the 3rd floor attic of the old convent with their unusual carry-ons. And to this day, the superstitious locals believe that the vampires sneak out of the convent to feed at night. Although how they sneak out of a building they were locked in is beyond me. Hey look, since the young women were trapped in the convent along with the monsters, I hope that the vampires were at least gentlemen enough to romance the young ladies with sparkly romps through the forest while calling them spider monkeys, or at the very least, the women are keeping them away from the vervain. And if you got either of those references, or both of them, I love you. Alrighty everybody, we're gonna end today with a personal favorite, the Abbey of the Black Hag. Locally known as St. Catherine's Abbey, or simply as Old Abbey, it's located roughly 2 miles east of the village of Shanagolden, in the townland of Old Abbey. Can you guess where it got its name? One of the earliest recorded nunneries in Ireland, with its first official record being around 1298, this place was built on land donated by John Fitzthomas, and has the typical layout for abbeys of its time, with the dining hall, cells, isolated meditation areas, and other rooms still able to be identified amongst the ruins today. During the 15th century, there was a major battle for supremacy in the area between the Earl Fitzgerald and the prestigious Butler family, of which the earldom of Ormond belonged. It got to such an extent that the local bishop was known to pray for peace between the families at masses. During one of the nightly attacks, Earl Fitzgerald attempted to get his wife to safety, but as he was pulling her onto his horse, an arrow pierced her thigh, shattering the bone and spraying red bodily fluids. As he rode on, the countess appeared to have succumbed to her injury, leading the earl to seek sanctuary at St. Catherine's. The heartbroken man was certain his wife had passed, so he swiftly buried her beneath the altar and continued elsewhere to find safety. As the night went on, the nuns and residents began to hear hair-raising screams and made the decision to rebury the countess in the hopes of bringing her peace. When they dug up the body, they discovered her fingers were broken, her nails had been torn off. The poor woman had been buried alive, with a very slow and tumultuous end of her life. To this day, it is believed the countess has been unable to find peace and continues to scream in anguish, waiting for her husband to save her from a fate truly worse than death. Moving slightly ahead in time, we come to the Black Nun herself. Described as one in the order that wasn't content with being humble, helping others over herself, and the servitude to God, she instead craved power. The hag had her own cell, where she worshipped Satan and performed black magic, becoming a slave to the occult. Now this was the highest form of blasphemy in the church, and the other nuns in the order fled the abbey, while the hag remained in her now House of Darkness. I likey. To complete her rituals, the Black Nun would venture into the local community and perform depraved lewd acts and offer sacrifices, with the bones of young community members later discovered on the grounds. Now fast forward to modern times, where visitors have reported seeing the dark, shadowy figure of a nun wandering, the feeling of being constantly watched, and a disembodied hand reaching towards them. There's been flashlights that can't function in her cell, modern batteries drain too quickly to have any sort of rational explanation, just all over weird. And that brings me to the end of my list, which means it's time for comment section shoutouts. From the top 5 scary ghost sightings that will make you a believer, user MKing846 said that they've seen too many things to be a skeptic. You and me both, buddy. Annalise Bloom6765 also said they're a believer. They've had weird and paranormal, demonic things happen to them years ago. Yeah, no, trust me, I get it. And finally, Willie Gutierrez 2337 mentioned that they stay on the Queen Mary every year while working a reggae fest right across the street from it. And it's normal to see ladies walking towards you from afar and just disappear. They got used to it. Well damn, I guess I need to book a trip. Alright. The grounds are also home to a young female entity called Mary, who witnessed her lover ending the life of another and then turned him in. She has often been seen with the ghost of a dog, but we're not sure if they're connected or not. The footage we have today, by the way, is another stellar example of spirit communication tech at work. I've used some of those things before myself. They are quite reliable and pretty freaky. Okie dokie, internet sleuths, I need your help with this next video. In my opinion, it's an internet legend that's been kicking around since 2007. Heck, I remember the first time I watched it on my little iPod under my High School Musical comforter, terrified. I was up too late, and when my brain saw something like this, well, I was already in the dark. Well, let's just say it sent my mind racing. I'm the kind of gal who needs to have all the doors closed in a room or I cannot sleep. It is not happening. Heck, I was recently in an area that was affected by a weird power outage, and I think I lasted like an hour in the darkness with my 20 candles before I went to a home with power because I couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts, and yeah, nope. Not it. Sorry, back to the video I go. This one depicts David Holley and Jake Garrison, who alleged that they stumbled upon an abandoned chapel in the woods and decided to do some sleuthing. As one does. How very Scooby-Doo of you. And the duo encountered a spirit playing the piano while they did. And very well, if I say so myself. Fun fact about me, folks, I took Royal Conservatory piano testing when I was younger, so I have an idea of what I'm talking about. I used to have to sight read. Other than that, I have no idea where the funeral channel guys are located, so let me know in the comments what you know. Okie dokie, everybody. We're gonna end today with an exorcism filmed through a peephole. So it's no secret that exorcisms are still a practice done today, but the Catholic Church really likes pretending that they don't because of the negativity and stigma around it. Technically speaking, the Catholic Church authorizes the use of exorcism for those who are believed to be the victims of demonic possession. Specifically, in Roman Catholicism, exorcism is a sacramental but not a sacrament, unlike baptism, confirmation, or confession. So unlike a sacrament, exorcism's efficiency depends on two elements: authorization from valid and legitimate church authorities and the faith of the exorcist. The church will ask publicly, and in a position of authority, in the name of Jesus Christ, that a person or object be protected against the power of the evil one and withdrawn from his dominion. Now, the rite of exorcism was revised in January of 1999 and assumes that possessed persons retain their free will, though the demon may hold control over their physical body and involves prayers, blessings, and invocations with the use of the document of exorcisms and certain supplications. Typically, the individual will be restrained and the priest will perform a ritual of prayers to remove the evil spirits. Solemn exorcisms, according to the canon law of the church, can be exercised only by an ordained priest or higher, with the express permission of the local bishop, and only after a careful medical examination to exclude the possibility of mental illness. The Catholic Church has between 500 to 600 official exorcists, by the way, with the vast majority operating in Latin America and Eastern Europe. Now that we're all clear on the formal definition of exorcisms, let's dive into this lovely video from 2014. The ritual was captured on camera by a man who heard the shrieks of a woman inside the sanctuary and filmed it through a peephole. The incident occurred at the Assumption of the Virgin Mary Church in Vranov nad Digi in February of 2014, and the church priest, Marek Dunda, confirmed the video is real, but mentioned that if something's filmed through a keyhole, he's not going to say anything about it, which, that's a dodging the question kind of answer if I've ever heard one. And trust me, I'm the daughter of a politician. He told the newspaper he carries a mandate from his bishop to perform exorcisms. He said that the group was asking God to protect and to liberate the person that was suffering, which included using a Latin prayer asking for help, and of course it helps. Look, I'm no expert on exorcism rituals, yet. But if you have to state that of course something helps, in my personal opinion, I'm a little skeptical. It's kind of hard to tell what's happening in the video, but it appears that at least two people surround the woman, who can be heard screaming in agony with momentary pauses in between for the duration of the just under 2-minute long video. Daniel Trokta, who shot the video after hearing the screams, warns people in the description to watch the chilling footage while wearing headphones. When asked about the condition of the woman in the video, the priest said any details about her or her state were private. And while I'm glad the church is respecting her privacy, I just hope the poor woman has been cured and healed. As much as I joke about it and I make light of it, demonic possession is no pleasant or laughing matter.
Our first stop takes us to Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Here, rumors persist of a 19th century priest whose spirit is unable to find peace. This was no ordinary priest. Arriving in a city rife with anti-Catholic sentiment, his own leanings towards Catholic traditions and rumors of scandalous behavior made him a target. Accusations flew, his reputation was dragged through the mud, and ultimately, his life ended abruptly by poison. But his passing was not the end for Father Jardine. Many who have been near St. Mary's late at night report an unsettling feeling of being watched. Strange footsteps echo in the empty building, and the phantom scent of incense fills the air, even when no candles are lit. Some have even claimed to see the shadowy figure of a priest with a flickering candle in the second-story window, a silent sentinel forever bound to the church he served. and the controversies that consumed him. Father Jardine's spirit, forever in torment, a chilling reminder that judgment and scandal can leave an indelible mark, even in the most sacred of places. Our next destination leads us to the vibrant yet haunted city of New Orleans, Louisiana, and the majestic St. Louis Cathedral. Beneath its soaring spires and stained glass windows lurks the spectral presence of Père Antoine. This man of the cloth was a significant figure in the city's early days, even officiating the marriage of the legendary voodoo queen, Marie Laveau. But his story has a darker twist. Whispers claim Père Antoine was secretly connected to the Spanish Inquisition, though eventually exiled and later returning as a beloved figure. Some believe the weight of his past deeds, the secrets he carried, tether his spirit to the cathedral grounds. They say his shadowy figure can still be glimpsed through the stained glass windows during Mass, a silent observer of the faithful. Others claim to feel his unseen presence in the quiet gardens behind the cathedral, a lingering echo of a life intertwined with both the sacred and the shadowed. Père Antoine, forever bound to the St. Louis Cathedral, a haunting reminder that even within holy walls, secrets can leave an eternal imprint. Across the Atlantic, in Louisville, Kentucky, stands the imposing First Church of Christ Scientist. Here, tragedy has woven a dark thread into the fabric of the building. Local sightings of the Lady of the Stairs, a young woman, forever pacing the steps. They say she was a member of a prominent family, deeply in love with a soldier. Their secret meetings took place right here, on these very stairs, under the watchful gaze of the church. Their plan was to escape, to be together despite her family's wishes. But on the night they were to meet at this sacred place, he never came. She waited, a jilted bride, her heart shattering with each passing moment. Unbeknownst to her, tragedy had struck. Her beloved soldier had succumbed to illness at a nearby camp. Chilled to the bone, believing herself abandoned, she returned home, only to fall ill herself. And in a cruel twist of fate, she too passed away, never knowing the truth. Now, they say her spectral figure still walks those stairs, forever waiting for a love that will never return. We now journey north to Manitoba, Canada, and the seemingly serene St. Andrew's on the Red. But don't let its peaceful facade fool you. This historic church is said to be haunted by not one, but two unsettling figures. Who are they? Some say they might be former community members, their spirits unable to find rest. Others speculate they could be Captain William Kennedy and his wife. Their story now woven into the very fabric of this haunted place. The church itself seems to hold its breath, with reports of the antique pipe organ playing by itself when no one is there. And those who dare to venture near at night speak of glowing red eyes that drift through the cemetery trees, watching, waiting. St. Andrew's on the Red, a place where history and the supernatural collide, a chilling reminder that some stories and some spirits never truly fade. Our final stop brings us to the ancient heart of London, England, to St. Bartholomew's Church. Within the ancient walls of St. Bartholomew's Church, a figure is said to roam, the ghost of a monk named Raher. This was no ordinary cleric. In the 12th century, Raher, a man known for his charm, experienced a powerful vision that led to the very founding of this sacred place. But his connection to the church didn't end with his passing. Centuries later, during renovations, Raher's tomb was opened. Inside, his skeleton lay undisturbed, still wearing his monk's sandals. And here's where the tale takes a truly unsettling turn. It's said that a workman, in a moment of thoughtless folly, took one of Raher's sandals, bones and all, Days later, the man returned, pale and shaken, claiming a sudden illness had befallen him. He returned the sandal, but the damage was done. Legend now chills the very stones of Saint Bartholomew's. On moonlit nights, they say the spectral form of Roche can be seen gliding through the aisles, a silent, desperate search in his eternal quest for his missing foot. A ghostly monk, forever bound to his earthly remains, a chilling reminder that even in hallowed halls, some spirits find no rest.
Okay, I think I'm going to start off today with the Emanuel Baptist Church in San Francisco. Now, this place was cursed from the start. In 1878, the church moved from a rented hall on 22nd and Folsom to more permanent digs at 22nd and Cat. Now, a short time later, the church's first pastor, Reverend Charles Hughes, slashed his own throat with a straight razor. His replacement chose a more common method of ending it all and fired an explosive into his own head. 2 ministers, 2 lives ended early. You'd think that mission residents would have burned the place to the ground after that and called it a day, but the church just kept trucking. The congregation moved to a new building on Bartlett Street between 22nd and 23rd in 1890, and things stayed quiet for nearly 5 years. When the Reverend John George Gibson took over the church in 1984, his predecessor had 0 issues. But the curse came back, and this time it was gorier than ever. On Saturday, April 13th of 1895, a group of church ladies was decorating the pulpit for the next day's lavish Easter Sunday celebrations. One of them found the red fluid-drenched body of a young woman in a small library storeroom. The girl had been harmed physically, and her remains had been cut and hacked, according to the Spokesman Review of Spokane, Washington. The victim had also been gagged by the assailant with a part of her underclothing that was jammed down her throat with a sharp stick. At first, the churchwoman thought the body was 21-year-old Blanche Lamont, a popular member of the congregation who had been missing for 10 days. However, the body was later identified as Minnie Williams, a woman who liked the church enough to journey from Alameda by ferry for services. Lamont only stayed missing for another day, though, before a search of the church grounds uncovered her body at the top of a rickety staircase in the church's ominous bell tower. She was stripped of her clothing with her hands clasped upon her chest, according to sources. Unlike Williams, Lamont was not mutilated beyond the marks of fingers that had been pressed deep into the tender flesh and the damage done by 11 days of decomposition. The cursed church could now add a double homicide to its litany of misfortunes. Police quickly arrested Theodore Durant, a medical student and superintendent of Emanuel Baptist Sunday School, who was identified by several eyewitnesses as the last man seen with both victims. He denied killing the 2 women, but Williams's purse was found in Durant's coat during a search of his house. A pawnbroker later testified that Durant had tried to sell him one of Lamont's rings days after her disappearance. The jury found him guilty in just 22 minutes on November 1st of 1895. After the killings, mission residents called for the cursed church to be burned to the ground, but it stayed. Even the earthquake of 1906 and the fires that followed failed to take down the building. At this point, I've lost track of how many people died at or because of this church, and as somebody who was already uneasy around religious buildings, hell to the no. The amount of bad energy is just oozing from this place. Sorry folks, it doesn't get any better with the Egg Hill Church. Now, supposedly, this is one of the most haunted churches that we know of. Legend has it that the crazy pastor of the Egg Hill Church killed all his parishioners post-communion, and soon after, went the way of the rope necklace. Local legend says that in the late 19th century, the church's minister decided to kill his entire congregation during a Halloween service. While the congregation's younger generation played in the rooms below the main church, the minister passed around poisoned bread and wine. While the second congregation choked on their last words, their offspring rushed upstairs to see the final moments of their parents. At the crescendo of the atrocity, the debauched minister went the way of the rope necklace near the altar. Some believe that his ghost haunts the abandoned church, while others believe that the ghosts of his victims haunt it. People have reported hearing the cries of the young victims that died at the hands of the pastor, even though the building remains locked away and empty. And hey, if that wasn't enough, word has it that the abandoned church and its premises are vandalized, along with being haunted by ghosties. Not that I think it'll do any good, but this is a warning to urban explorers and wannabes. Maybe just avoid this one.
Number 3, Monaster Nagayal the Duff, or Abbey of the Black Hag, if you don't got all that time. Wow, you see that? You see what that church is called on that little chyron below me right now? I'm just supposed to pronounce that with my lips? Okay, it's also called the Abbey of the Black Hag, and that's what we're going with. We're not calling it that other thing. I'm not doing that. Black Abbey of the Hag, only name this church has ever gone by, and it was built in 1298. And it was one of the well-known medieval convents in Old Ireland. The remains of the abbey still stand today in a secluded valley, making it an already mysterious and supernatural place just that much more supernatural and overgrown and spooky. I mean, the place is called the Abbey of the Black Hag. You don't name a place that unless it's extremely haunted or if there's like a cool boss fight or something there. Sounds like it's straight out of Dishonored. It's believed that the last abbess, horrible word by the way, in charge of the abbey practiced witchcraft, and in the scary way, okay? She brought death, misfortune to the surrounding areas. Pope Martin V condemned the abbey, not being down for witches at all. The accused witch left to live out in the damp, deserted abbey by herself, which she probably loved because it sounds scary. Over time, her skin blackened, her hair furled, and her soul twisted, leading to the place being renamed the Abbey of the Black Hag. And if you can believe it, there's actually more to this one. The Count and Countess of Desmond once called the abbey home when attempting to flee their attackers, where the Countess was fatally struck by an arrow and buried by her husband. But it wouldn't be the end of the Countess, because sightings of a ghostly figure around the ruins of the abbey were common, meaning someone eventually went to dig up that grave, finding worn out finger bones, meaning she was still alive when she was buried. It's said now that a woman's panicked shrieking can be heard in the early hours around the abbey. Number 2. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal, or anything. Almost immediately after its construction, stories of hauntings started to creep out. One of the first local legends says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had a naughty little affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. Since then, they say that her spirit roams the rectory. In 1900, 4 daughters of the then estate owner all said that they saw a nun wandering around the estate late at night. They tried to talk to her but got no response back, just a scary ghost stare. The family claimed they'd see this nun around the property, and on one occasion they thought they saw the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider, some real Sleepy Hollow stuff. From there on, there was all these reports of bizarre sounds or strange shadows creeping out the corner of your eye. In 1927, the estate changed hands as the original family owning the estate had all passed on, and a new family, the Smiths, had moved in. Shortly after, they discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag. Which is not a great housewarming gift, to be honest. They reported poltergeist behavior, unexplained footsteps, lights flicking around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. Now, they only lasted 2 years, not being down for any of the hauntings or skulls in cupboards, any of that business. And the next family, the Foysters, didn't have much better luck. They had objects flying around their home, and on one occasion claimed their daughter was attacked by something truly horrible. They moved out as well. And the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, although insurance claims they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil has been trapped in the Borley Rectory for so long, or perhaps he unintentionally unleashed it out into the world. Time will tell. At number 1, Mortimer Abbey. Mortimer Abbey is a monastery in the forest of Lyons, France. A real old church built in 1134 on marshland, near the stagnant water of the drainage lake. The monks dug it out to try and dry the marshy land around the Fulbrock stream, which was called the Dead Pond. In French, Meltmal, which is where the name comes from. You can kind of hear it there. Mortimer, you know. Perhaps it's this history of being built on a dead pond is why Mortimer Abbey was doomed to be haunted. Now, the abbey flourished for centuries, but over time started to become claimed by the passage of time, and it fell into decline and disrepair. In the 17th century, there was an attempt to try and rebuild the abbey and recapture its former old glory, but the decline was already pretty present and had set in by that point, and by the time of the French Revolution, only 5 monks still remained in the abbey. Eventually, the abbey would collapse entirely and go private, and in 1863, the abbey would find itself in the hands of a rich Parisian family, the Delarues. Mr. Delarue moved his wife and his sons into the abbey, but soon discovered they weren't the only tenants. While walking the lawns, the young people of the house saw a light from the library. As if by an invisible hand, these hatches unfastened, their handles turned, and the windows and doors all opened. The paintings on the inside of the abbey turned themselves around and steps thundered out into the halls, and nobody moved out immediately after. I would have started looking for new real estate right then and there. But one night the young Delarue, Charles, had his fiancée over to come see the estate that would become her new home in marriage. She was offered the guest room, but found found herself terrified during the night when she couldn't sleep because she was too busy being tormented by mysterious sounds and objects around the room that were hurling themselves around, being possessed by something. Having had, quite frankly, enough, like I think any of us might have, the young suitor announced she would never live in this house, called off the entire marriage, and hurried back to Paris tout de suite, where there were plenty of handsome young men asking her hand in marriage who didn't live in old haunted estates, okay? That's the message to take away from this. Get the love you deserve, and the love you deserve is not in a haunted house.
The Witches of Belvoir is one of the most famous tales of English witchcraft, and if you don't know it, don't worry, that's what I'm here for. Welcome to my new favorite thing. Let's picture things together, folks. There's this old Gothic church with a towering spire surrounded by gravestones, and it's called St. Mary's Church. Sounds like the perfect setting for a horror movie, right? So back in the early 1600s, there was this woman named Joan Flower who lived there with her daughters, Philippa and Margaret. They were basically outcasts in their community, and they worked as servants for the Earl of Rutland at Belvoir Castle. But here's the thing, they got fired for stealing, and that's when things took a turn for the worse. Legend has it that the Flower women were so ticked off about getting canned that they decided to get revenge on the Earl. And how did they do it? Well, let's look at the times. Witchcraft, of course. Yeah, apparently they put a curse on the Earl's two sons, which were the heirs to his earldom, and well, let's just say it didn't end well for the boys. Fast forward to today, and the story is still giving people the EBGBs. This church is like ground zero for creepy tales. Inside the church, there's this tomb that commemorates the deaths of the two boys, and it says that they were, well, killed by wicked practices and sorcery. Fun little additional fact for y'all, St. Mary's Church is the only place in England where you can find a tomb that officially pins witchcraft as the cause of death. Which, that's a little chilling. No wonder the Pope wants to steer clear of this place. Who wants to mess with that kind of dark energy? So, next time you're in the area, maybe think twice before wandering into this church. Unless, you're into that whole haunted cursed tomb vibe. Which, I am. I don't look like it today, but I promise. Normally my cup of tea. Alright, so we're gonna stay in England for this next entry and move over to St. Mary the Virgin in Clophill. Clophill? Clophill? I looked up 5 different pronunciations and they told me 5 different things, so you tell me which one's right, folks. Originally built facing the west sometime around the year 1350, it's believed to have been erected on top of a leper hospital run by monks. I'd like to take a moment to note that it was built in the wrong direction, with churches traditionally facing east, the direction from which the sun rises, which is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah in Christian religion. Altars inside of these holy buildings would face in the eastbound direction for prayers. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin faces away from God, it thus opens the doors to hell, and ergo responsible for the tale I'm about to tell. Oh, that was a good rhyme. The building was abandoned in 1848 when the rector at the time made the decision to have a new church built, instead of expanding the previous one, which was much needed due to the rapidly growing congregation. Old St. Mary's, as was dubbed by the locals, was then primarily used as a mortuary chapel, holding bodies before they were buried in the adjacent cemetery. By the 1950s, St. Mary's had become so run down that it could no longer fulfill that use, with just the outdoor walls and tower remaining. In March of 1963, the tomb of an 18th century apothecary's wife was broken into and the bones were arranged ritualistically in the middle of the church. And once again, on Midsummer's Eve of 1969, multiple women's graves were broken into, with bones being removed and rearranged once more. While the specific individuals involved in these acts were never identified, the arrangements found resembled those used in black mass rituals performed by satanic groups at the time. After the first incident in 1963, a rare decision was made to rehallow, or in more simple terms, re-bless the altar, which was left in the building in a failed attempt to protect the building from evil. Later that year, Reverend Harold Colthurst reported stumbling upon a group of men in the building that were in the midst of a mysterious ritual, being quoted as saying that the men were trying to communicate with evil spirits, chanting some sort of mumbo-jumbo. They were definitely in league with the devil. Modern-day visitors to the now landmark have reported seeing a plethora of ghostly figures during daytime, nighttime, faint lights moving about before vanishing mysteriously, along with reports of a chilly and oppressive atmosphere even during warm days. Yeah, I can see why some religious folks might not want to go there. How about we talk about a church that might not be haunted but still has some awfulness? Built in the late 8th century under the regime of the Sailendra dynasty, Borobudur Temple took an army of workers and 60,000 cubic meters of lava rock to construct. Yet, despite its massive size and elaborate rows of Buddha statues, it was mysteriously abandoned during the 14th century and sat in the jungle, undiscovered until 1814. It was finally restored with the helping hand of UNESCO in the 1970s, and its walls have some weird carvings, depicting the tormenting of humans, beheadings, and much more gruesome visuals that throw some light on the violent buried past of the site. I can't go into detail, sadly. Despite efforts to protect the temple, a few stupas were nearly destroyed during an attack in 1985. As the site is quite near to a few active volcanoes, the temple has also received its share of volcanic dust and earthquake events. The efforts for conservation have always been made after similar events have happened though, so they're trying to keep it. In the style of a step pyramid, the temple has 6 square bases, topped with 3 circular layers and a large main stupa. Pilgrims and visitors alike follow a guided path to the top of the complex, which leads them around the monument a number of times before reaching the peak. And along the way, the path is marked by 500 Buddha statues and thousands of reliefs that depict daily life in Buddhist Java. It's not spooky, but you still don't want to go there.
Is Rosslyn Chapel. Rosslyn Chapel is located in Scotland and is arguably the most haunted church in that country. This chapel has a ton of ghostly legends surrounding it that lead to the lore of its hauntings. The Rosslyn Chapel actually writes themselves. In July 2006, a group of actors were rehearsing in the chapel for a play they were about to do at the Edinburgh Festival. One said that he saw a fairy-like figure in the grounds of the building. Another was locking up the chapel at the end of the rehearsal. As he was doing so, heard the voice of a child in the crypt. Obviously, he didn't want to lock the child in overnight, so he went down to the crypt to get the child, but found that there was no one there. Another tale says that the ghost of a white lady haunts Rosslyn Chapel. Legend has it that she is a girl from the St. Clair family who was bewitched by an evil spell and sleeps in an enchanted chamber. Here, she is waiting to be rescued by a knight. Once rescued, the spell upon her will be broken and the knight will be granted great treasures. And yet another tale is of a phantom dog which roams the grounds around the chapel, and on stormy nights its ghostly barking can be heard. We got a fairy, we got a child, we got spells, we got a dog. This chapel has everything that a paranormal lover could ever want. They also didn't mention in that article about the ghosts of the monks that supposedly live there. This used to be an area where a bunch of monks would meet while they were alive, and it seems as if their ghosts have never left. And the crazy part about all of this is that nobody knows why this church is as haunted as it is. Most places that are tied to spirits have some sort of horror story to go along with them, but there really isn't anything here at all. I suppose it's possible that this church just happened to be built on an area where tons of spiritual energy has gathered. Hit me in the comments down below what you guys think happened to this place to get it like this, cause I'm honestly stumped. Number 4 on this list is the Ness Church. This church is located in Norway and is no longer functioning. It's actually a collection of ruins now and a very popular spot for ghost hunters. The ghosts here are very interesting and unique. It seems as if they have a strong connection to electronic devices, because whenever anyone brings an electronic device to this place, it will immediately stop working and start flashing uncontrollably. If one wants to have an electronic device here, then it needs to be specifically made to withstand strong spiritual energy. The most popular myth surrounding the ghostly presence that resides here is of a priest named Jacob Christian Finnegan. This was a priest who presided over this church from 1800 to 1837. Apparently he suffered a very grim fate here along with his children. People believe that at some point a gang of thieves came to this place and murdered him. Along with his death, they took his children and bricked them up in the church, leaving them there before ransacking the place and taking any valuables. An even darker version of the legend says that the priest did this to his children himself and then promptly hung himself in the church for the locals to later find. I'm not too sure which legend is the true one, but either one would have left their dark mark behind. The screams of these children are frequently accompanied by the sighting of this priest. It's said that he'll stalk those who come here and follow them around, giving them a horribly uneasy feeling. At this point, the church is nothing but a ruin of its former self, and considering the ghostly presence that's waiting for you, I just avoid going altogether. Number 3 on this list is Egg Hill Church. This church was home to one of the worst tragedies a church has ever been host to. I've never been a real churchgoer myself, but from my understanding, love, life, spirituality, all of this is supposed to be in the air when you go, and the whole reason for doing so. Death and hate and violence, that's all supposed to be left at the door. Pennsylvania's Egg Hill Church didn't quite do that. Instead, they invited death into the church on one particular Halloween night. Many years ago, the whole community gathered into the church on Halloween. The priest passed around bread and wine as is customary, but this bread and wine was a little off. In fact, it was very off. So off that everyone who had it died. It was poisoned. It's unknown whether the town had collectively decided to end their lives together that night or if this was all the priests doing, but either way, tens to hundreds of people's bodies lay lifeless on the ground when it was all said and done. Now, what are we left with? Well, the ghosts of all of these people, obviously. Even worse than that, the spirit of this evil priest still lingers here too, and apparently, he isn't done with the living. He's said to be very dangerous and wants to drag visitors down with him and take their life. This whole story is pretty much as dark as you can get, and it's no wonder the place is totally messed up today. Number 2 on this list is St. Nicholas Church. Hey, it's me. It just so happens that my church is haunted by a dozen spirits. Great. List first says St. Nicholas Church is practically haunted by default. That's because the village of Pluckley, its home, is reputably the most haunted locale in all of England. The Kent village is home to the Watercress woman, who occupies the Pinnock Bridge, and to the ghost of a schoolmaster who committed in front of his pupils. According to a conservative estimate, Pluckley contains no fewer than 12 active spirits. The church itself is said to be the home of both the beautiful ghost of Lady Daring and the Lady in Red, a ghost who searches the adjacent churchyard for her lost baby. The ghost of a former miller who worked in the area is also said to haunt the churchyard in search of a long-lost love. Also, the ghost of a monk at nearby Greystone's house is also said to be seen during the night. Finally, visitors to St. Nicholas have reported seeing lights in the church's windows when no one was inside. So we have another church with just a plethora of horrible things. Someone taking their own life, a missing a man who has lost his loved one. My question is, why did all of this happen at this one church? Like, what really caused all of this to transpire in the first place? Are we just supposed to believe that it's all coincidence, or is there actually something more afoot here? I think that's the real secret, and sadly, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to find the true answer. And finally, number 1 on this list is St. Andres on the Red. Just that name alone, on the Red. Like, of course this place had to have some dark secrets. List first says St. Andrews on the Red, completed in 1849, is located in the town of Selkirk, which is more or less a suburb of Winnipeg. It's the oldest stone church in Western Canada, and it may be the region's most haunted thanks to the spirits of former plague victims. Other apparitions are said to populate the church's graveyard. Eyewitnesses have reported seeing a ghostly man clad in black and a mysterious woman in white. Also, a disembodied pair of red eyes have startled the visitors in the past, while a ghost car has been noted not far from the church's main entrance. If you're thinking about visiting the church or graveyard, be wary. Those who've claimed to have seen the various apparitions also reported having terrible nightmares the following nights. Most of these nightmares apparently involved the gates of the cemetery, which rattle even though no hands are seen shaking them. Some people can't shake these nightmares either. The occasional individual will have these persist for months or even years. I'm sure that the architecture and natural beauty is nice and all, but I'm not trying to risk nightmares for a year to see it. I do wonder what happened to those gates though. Is it some weird thing with the wind that's causing it, or is it what people suggest, some type of ghostly intervention? I tend to think some sort of spirit has to be involved, considering the thing with the nightmares happens as well, but you gotta wonder who. Sometimes I really do think that being a paranormal investigator would be awesome, because you could get to the bottom of these things, but then again, that's a pretty unforgiving profession. Number 5 on this list is the Old Post Chapel. This chapel is located in the Arlington, Virginia Cemetery and is definitely one of the most haunted churches in the world. The Arlington Public Library writes, the Old Post Chapel was commissioned by Major George Patton Jr. in 1933 when he toured the chapels on the grounds of the Walter Reed Hospital. Patton told Post Commander Colonel Kenyon Joyce that the new chapel should combine the functions of a principal chapel with those of a mortuary chapel in one building. Workers broke ground in February 1934, and the chapel was officially dedicated on April 21, 1935, where it was known for its attractive spire and intricate stained glass windows. The chapel serves as a place of worship for the community, a wedding chapel, and a place of final honors for those laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. Many fallen service members have lain in wait in the old post chapel for their final trip, and it's allowed family members to grieve in private. So it's unsurprising that many active duty service members have reported hearing disembodied voices and footsteps in the chapel when they've been there alone. Locked doors have unlocked themselves and opened on their own. Canine units patrolling with service people will refuse to go into the building and bark at the door, especially at night. And visitors describe a young grief-stricken woman dressed in white who waits for her sweetheart. Rumors are that she threw herself from the bell tower, which remains locked to this day. So what really sticks out to me there, guys, about that excerpt is the canine units. Dogs not wanting to go into this place because they're scared. You ever notice how animals can get skittish when a big storm is coming or something like that? Well, they sense these things and they pick up on stuff that humans just don't. I personally imagine that they probably have a similar ability with spiritual presences or anything of that nature. Also, considering how many people have been laid to rest here, it's no wonder why this place would be as haunted as people are claiming it to be. If you're going, then definitely pray before entering, but don't be scared to just avoid it altogether either. Number 4 on this list is the Abbaye de Mortimer. This abbey was a whole thriving community at one point, but now it's a total ruin of its former self. For the purposes of this video, we're going to be zeroing in on the place of worship that they had at this spot and looking at how haunted that is. And let me tell you, it's pretty freaking haunted. In the 15th century, this place was booming and one of the brightest communities in France. It really looked like it was on the come up. But fast forward 200 years later and things had really fallen off. Greed had taken over and the men who were in charge were far more interested in their personal gain than the growth of this place. People started leaving and things started to wear and tear with time. Eventually there got to a point where there were only a handful of monks still there living under the leaky roof of this abbey. Well, in 1790 they met a very grim and sick fate. This was the time of the French Revolution and religion was very much out of favor. A group of revolutionists swept through the area and believing that the monks had some sort of treasure hidden here, they took them into the cellar and they killed them. The manner to which these men died was brutal. Because of this, it's believed that their spirit still clings to the ruins of this place. Future owners of this location had many run-ins with ghosts and even had to perform some exorcisms in their time being there. There have also been reports of werewolves and other demonic creatures here. The monks are by far the most spotted poltergeists though. The crazy thing is that apparently they aren't that evil. One would think that after their life was so ruthlessly stripped away from them that they would harbor some anger, but apparently they don't. If you do make it out here, then I recommend you pray not only as a form of safety, but also as a sign of respect for the souls of the monks who still live here. Number 3 on this list is the Aquia Episcopal Church. Heading back to Virginia with this one, this church is located in a place called Stafford. The church itself is rather beautiful and looks super unsuspecting. Some of the other churches on this list in our previous part just gave me the vibe that something was up, but this one doesn't. The outside and the inside make you feel homey and very safe. Problem is, this isn't the case. Only in your state writes, one of the most famous mysteries associated with the church is that of the golden-haired skeleton. No one knew about the death of the woman who was murdered inside Aquia until her skeleton was later discovered in the Rectory, and her hair was later discovered in the Belvoir, and her hair was still intact, just as blonde as the day she died. At the time, the church had lost funding due to the Revolutionary War, and that might have been the reason why no one discovered her body until later. The event seems equally tragic and mysterious. It's been said that bloodstains from the murder remained on the floorboard for nearly 100 years until it was replaced altogether with concrete. Not so surprisingly, many ghost stories worked their way through the community after the skeleton was discovered. Many parishioners refused to set foot in the church after dark. In the 1900s, people decided to seek evidence of hauntings for themselves. Many returned with chilling tales of having encountered an unfriendly presence. Even today, there's plenty of paranormal activity associated with the church grounds. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps running through the graveyard accompanied by the sound of a violent struggle. Others claim to see the figure of a young golden-haired woman peering from the balcony window. So clearly this church has got a pretty dark history to it. It's said that the skeleton that was found was of a woman who was murdered by some men prior to the Revolutionary War. The church then closed for the war and reopened after it, so her body would have been stuck here decomposing for probably decades. It's no wonder that her soul hung on to this place and refused to let go. It's honestly really very sad if you ask me, because from all the reports that I read, her ghost isn't evil, it's just a lonely one. It's clear by the way she holds herself that she doesn't want to be stuck in this purgatory place, she just is. Similar to our monks, you should pray as a sign of respect before entering this church if you do ever go.
In at number 2 we have Aquia Episcopal Church in Virginia. This church is said to be one of the most haunted churches in Virginia. Legend says that the church and the church graveyard, which has graves dating back to 1738, are both home to paranormal activity that has taken place for over 200 years. Even the early years of the church being opened were marked with tragedy. In the mid-18th century, a woman was hiding from a group of men within the church's walls and lost her life. Even more upsetting was the fact that she was not discovered until years later, when the church reopened after the Revolutionary War. No one knows exactly the details of the loss, yet there have been several claims of paranormal activity since. Her hair just as blonde as the day she lost her life. At that time, the church had lost funding due to the Revolutionary War, and that might have been the reason why no one discovered her body until later. Moreover, it's been said that blood stains from the murder remained on the floorboards for nearly 100 years, till it was replaced altogether with concrete. Many ghost stories worked their way through the community after the skeleton was discovered. Many parishioners refused to set foot in the church after dark. In the 1900s, people decided to seek evidence of hauntings for themselves. Many returned with chilling tales of having encountered an unfriendly presence. Built before the Civil War, this church is reportedly visited by the ghost of a soldier killed during the conflict. The most haunted part of the building is the church tower. Others claim that the reason for the haunting involves a young woman who was murdered there. The eerie lights and unexplained sounds are reason enough to stay away after dark. Even today, there is plenty of paranormal activity associated with the church grounds. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps running through the graveyard accompanied by the sound of a violent struggle. Others claim to see the figure of a young golden-haired woman peering from the balcony window. With all the tragedies and loss of lives that happen within the walls of this church, not to mention the paranormal activity, it's safe to assume that there is some evil spirits and energy cursing the church. And finally, in at number 1 we have St. Columcille, Ontario. Dating back to 1855, St. Columcille Church was founded and located in the hamlet of Uptergrove. The original frame church was torn down and the present brick edifice was constructed in 1905. This structure sits on a hill far back from the road and can easily be viewed when driving on Highway 12 east from Aurelia. The ghost stories have been spreading since over 100 years ago, classifying the church was haunted, and these tales have been circulated ever since. Today the church is deemed haunted by some local residents and visitors. There have been many reports of ghost sightings, shadowy figures that will suddenly appear, creaking doors and eerie music that will play randomly from the organ. There have also been numerous reports of shadowy sightings of a figure wearing a black hat that floats through the choir area, creating chills for those who had observed it. Mysterious candlelight has been seen flickering from the windows on stormy nights. Many believe the spirit responsible is that of a former priest who, according to legend, pledged to complete a specific number of sermons, though he lost his life before he was able to attain that number. Now some churchgoers say he is returning to fulfill that promise.
Number 5 on this list is the Borobudur Temple. Borobudur Temple is located in Indonesia and is frankly extremely beautiful. It's located on the island of Java and is one of the biggest Buddhist temples in the entire world. It truly looks like something from a legend or from something directly out of an Indiana Jones movie. Now, it was built many hundreds of years ago between 780 AD and 840 AD during the Selandria dynasty. There's a lot of lore that surrounds this temple and a ton of mystery. Located in a very remote location, it kind of got forgotten about for several hundred years. Then in 1970 it was almost rediscovered by UNESCO, and it was decided that they would try and rejuvenate it to its former glory. Now, during the process of rediscovering this beauty, they also rediscovered the darker side of this place, which has people believing at least at one point the devil may have been hiding here. Gruesome visuals etched into the interior of this temple depicting some just horrible things. Torture, beheadings, displays of sheer violence that I can't get into detail on YouTube about. Some awful drawings showing what would have gone down here at one point in history. Also, along with these acts of violence, some drawings that seem to point to the presence of the devil. Drawings looking at potential rituals that would have been performed in honor of this devil. People worshipping the devil and praising him, all of that. Nowadays, it's pretty understood that this place no longer hides the devil. But for several hundred years, it's very possible this could have been a bit of a stronghold for either the devil or another evil spirit. Number 4 on this list is the Chernobyl Church. Now, I imagine a lot of you have heard about Chernobyl before, the devastating accident that went down in Ukraine back in 1986. If you aren't familiar, then basically a huge nuclear power plant exploded, which caused the worst nuclear accident the world has ever seen. It killed 31 people right off the bat, and then several more over the years from radioactive poisoning. That area where the blast occurred has been closed off to the public, and rightfully so. It's literally still radioactive to this day, and if people were to go into the 20-mile radius that's closed and then proceeded to stay there for an extended period of time, they would certainly feel the negative effects of doing so. All of this has left for a very creepy abandoned city vibe that looks like something straight out of the apocalypse. Most of the buildings here are horribly worn down and starting to fall apart. After all, it's been over 30 years and no one has looked after them at all. Which is why it's very strange to see the church in this village still in perfect condition. Recently, somebody entered into the radiation zone and went into this church. They were shocked to see that the church itself on the inside was still in perfect form. Even though everything around it has been hit hard with decay, this building still remains how it was. Why? Well, the person taking these photos didn't know, and they didn't stay too long to find out. Apparently, after entering, it wasn't long before they started to feel a very ominous presence. Something deep and dark and sinister lurking here, not wanting to be found. As if entering the church woke whatever this thing was from its slumber, and it wasn't ready to be woken. This individual got out of there as fast as possible and didn't want to investigate further, but it got me thinking that this church might be hiding the devil. A horrible accident occurs where tons of people perish. The whole city gets abandoned and no one can come into this area for over 30 years. And this one flimsy little church is still totally intact and looking pristine. It seems a little bit too suspicious for me. If this is the case and this church is hiding the devil, then we can take it a bit further too. Now the real question comes out about how the Chernobyl accident really went down. Maybe the devil, or whatever demonic creature is living in this church, had some role to play. Number 3 on this list is Greyfriars Kirk and Churchyard. This church is located in Edinburgh in Scotland. History Hit says, with the Kirk tracing its origin to 1598 and the graveyard dating back even further to the 1560s, Greyfriars Kirk and Churchyard in Edinburgh is said to be one of the most haunted religious sites in the world. Known for body snatching and violent ghosts, the famously fearsome site has even been referred to by Scottish poet Robert Louis Stevenson. The site's most famous ghost is Mackenzie poltergeist George Mackenzie, who is known during his lifetime as a ruthless persecutor of Scottish Covenanters, a Presbyterian movement in the 17th century. His spirit was reportedly released in 1999 when a homeless man looking for somewhere to sleep broke into his final resting place, the Black Mausoleum. Next to this mausoleum is the former Covenanters prison, which housed some 1,200 members of a failed anti-government revolution in 1679. Only 257 prisoners came out alive, with the remaining dead sent to haunt the churchyard. This church is haunted by so much negative energy that people around the area believe it's actually attracted the devil. Basically, all of this evil has gotten the devil's attention, and it's possible that one of those evil spirits that's hiding out is the devil in disguise. It's also believed that the devil may have released all of these demonic spirits to keep people away from this place, as he's doing something sinister. We may never know for sure though. Number 2 on this list is the Borley Rectory. This is sometimes referred to as the most haunted place in all of England, so it definitely deserves a spot on our list. The Rectory, which for those who don't know is a Church of England, was built in 1863. For a bit over 50 years, nothing out of the ordinary or spectacular happened here. It was just a normal rectory. The horror stories didn't take place until 1929. A journalist named V.C. Wall was with a photographer in the woods nearby the rectory taking pictures one evening when they saw the weirdest thing. Apparently from the outside, the rectory looked as if it had a light on within it, but the second that you walked inside, that light disappeared. This phenomenon baffled both of the men, and they thought that something paranormal might be happening. Wall also reportedly said that he saw a nun that evening, or what looked to be the ghost of a nun, walking in the garden. After they told people about this story, some ghost hunters came forward and provided an explanation. Back in the 1300s, there was a monastery here. At this monastery, a monk had a relationship with a nun. This was found out and resulted in deadly punishment for both people. The nun got it particularly bad though, because she was bricked up alive in the convent walls and left there to die. The story from V.C. Wall brought this place to the public's attention, but apparently ghost stories have been told here from long before as well. Sightings of paranormal creatures have been seen and talked about dating back before the rectory was even built on this land. Clearly this whole area is just inherently cursed, and this rectory just happens to be built on it. Strange rapping sounds, bells ringing, objects moving and flying around without anybody touching them. These are all very common sightings at the Borley Rectory. The ghost of this nun is also a regular character here, making herself known to newcomers quite often. If you happen to get really lucky, then you may also see a ghost coach with 2 horses and a headless coachman. Maybe lucky is kind of the wrong word to use here, but this sighting is a lot rarer and doesn't come out to everybody. Either way, the Borley Rectory is way too haunted and should probably just be avoided at all costs. And finally, number 1 on this list is St. Paul's Episcopal Church. This church and the grounds that it resides on is haunted by a number of different ghouls. It's located in the Florida Keys and has seen many a tragedy in its days. Whether it be a hurricane, a great fire, or other natural disasters, this church has pretty much been through it all. Ghosts and Gravestones writes, "The most well-known haunt of St. Paul's Church Cemetery is that of a man in 19th century attire who appears as a flimsy white vapor. Many believe that it's the spirit of Fleming himself who seems upset. Is it because his gravesite was disturbed so many times throughout the years by all the reconstructions? Nobody knows for sure, but his apparition has startled many. Another spirit that seems to roam the graveyard is a sea captain who appears to take great pleasure in frightening visitors. And beware of the ghost of a man who was legendary for driving the pirates out of Key West. His spirit is angry and ready to taunt, and those who've encountered his apparition say that even on a day when the weather is calm, violent winds come rushing through a tree that sits right next to his grave." John Fleming, the ghost that they talk about there, was the initial owner of this land and died on the property. His wife donated said land to be used for the church, but apparently her husband's spirit never left. The story behind the sea captain is unknown. Why he's come here or what happened to him is all a mystery. One thing is for sure though, he is a very dangerous ghost, and many visitors have reported being assaulted and terrified by him. This is definitely one of those churches that I would again avoid altogether, but if you do go, then make sure you say a prayer before entering.
We have Oradour Church in France. Located in central France, a few miles from Limoges lies a now abandoned town called Oradour-sur-Glane. The town is now filled with empty houses, train lines that are out of order, and a sign of tragedy. With roadside walls pocked with bullet holes, fire marks, scorching stone houses, the church roof has gone through some massive explosion. This tragedy happened on June 10, 1944, when Adolf Dieckmann received information from members of the Vichy regime that SS officers had been captured and were being held by members of the French resistance at Oradour-sur-Vaires. Dieckmann led his team to Oradour-sur-Glane intent on revenge. Whether he went to Oradour-sur-Glane instead of Oradour-sur-Vaires on purpose, or whether he mixed up the two towns because of the similarity in their names, is something we will never know. The men of the village were quickly rounded up, then herded into a variety of surrounding barns and garages, as the women and children were confined to the local church. Then a gas explosion was placed in the church and lit aflame. There was only a handful to survive the tragic accident that happened at the church of this town. With all the lives lost lost in the church and surrounding town of that night, it is said to be haunted by many spirits. As some witnesses report, as they stand at the church's windows at night, they see the dark spirits of the people who lost their lives walking through the ruined village's deserted streets. Others state they often smell the aroma of burning wood and flesh as it lingers over this abandoned village. Until recently, the new residents would leave gifts along the border of the village of the martyred as a peace offering for the spirits that still haunt the church. In the end, we will never actually know the reason behind the attack upon the Oradour church on June 10, 1944, though some think there was an evil entity or spirit upon the church that coerced the attack to happen. Coming in at number 4, we have St. Mary the Virgin, England. In an English village, you'll find the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, built around 1350 just outside the main settlement. The church in Clophill, Bedfordshire was abandoned for around 170 years after it fell into disuse in the 1840s. There are a few odd things about this ancient little church, the most significant being that it was supposedly built facing the wrong direction. Churches are traditionally oriented to face east, the direction from which the sun rises, which in the Christian religion is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah. Churches are positioned with the altar facing east, so people will pray in that holy direction. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin Church faces away from God, it thus opens its doors to hell. Indeed, the church has a long history of reported hauntings and supposed satanic rituals. The 14th century church was reportedly used for satanic rituals in the 1960s. As rumor has it, bones were dug up and arranged in satanic patterns. A paranormal investigator has speculated that some kind of black magic was performed at a church in Clophill, making it one of the most haunted places in Bedfordshire. The investigator explained that there's definitely something strange going on at the church, and this personal view is that it's down to black magic practices held there. He explains that he has also had many people confess the terrifying experience that they've had with the church. One filmmaker told the investigator that he saw a dark shape that was extremely tall coming towards him. The filmmaker and his colleague ran when he felt something grab his arm, even though he couldn't see anything. Once police arrived to the scene, instead of laughing the claim off, they congested that they've spent a lot of time guarding the abandoned site, as many people experienced the same thing. Over the years, many people have reported seeing strange things near the church, from mysterious hooded monks to tall dark figures. In at number 3, we have Egg Hill Church, Spring Hills, Pennsylvania. Considered one of the most haunted churches known to man, we have Egg Hill Church in Spring Hill, Pennsylvania. The church was built in 1860 and was out of use by the 1920s. The most well-known story about Egg Hill Church is of the great number of people that supposedly lost their lives. This occurred at the turn of the century in the 1800s, when the pastor at the time ended the life of his whole congregation by poison and kept them in the nearby woods. Other stories say that the pastor only ended the life of the people of the parish. He reportedly would end their lives one by one under the mysterious circumstances and got away with it, until the day that he would be discovered, where he would end his own life in the church. Some who have been to the church say they have seen drawings of pentagrams and goats appear on the walls and ceilings, written by some unknown entity. Others say that from outside the church you can hear strange noises coming from the inside when the church is locked up and supposedly empty. Some claim the sounds are similar to children's voices. Therefore, there is no doubt that this haunted church has the potential to be cursed by the devil.
Number 3 on this list is Greyfriars Kirk and Churchyard. As the name Greyfriars might hint, this church is located in Scotland. History Hit says, with the kirk tracing its origin to 1598 and the graveyard dating back even further to the 1560s, Greyfriars Kirk and Kirkyard in Edinburgh is said to be one of the most haunted religious sites in the world. Known for body snatching and violent ghosts, the famously fearsome site has even been referred to by Scottish poet Robert Louis Stevenson. The site's most famous ghost is the Mackenzie poltergeist. George Mackenzie, who was known during his lifetime as a ruthless persecutor of Scottish Covenanters, a Presbyterian movement in the 17th century. His spirit was reportedly released in 1999 when a homeless man looking for somewhere to sleep broke into his final resting place, the Black Mausoleum. Next to this mausoleum is the former Covenanters prison, which housed some 1,200 members of a failed anti-government revolution in 1679. Only 257 prisoners came out alive, with the remaining dead said to haunt the churchyard. The negative energy that surrounds this church is said to be so strong that it's attracted some pretty powerful beings. The devil, is the one being that people associate with this place. Some believe that this church is actually a secret lair for the devil, that these other demonic spirits are working to keep us away from this place so the devil can fulfill his evil agenda. If this is the case, then I think that we should do as the devil wants and leave it alone. Number 2 on this list is Borley Rectory. Built in 1863 in England, this is one of the most famous haunted churches in the world. We can thank the personalities of Ed and Lorraine Warren for bringing it into the spotlight, as they had quite the experience at this church back in the day. The horror stories began back in 1929. A journalist named V.C. Wall was a photographer in the woods nearby the rectory taking pictures one evening when they saw something very strange. From the outside, the rectory looked like it had a light on, but if you walked inside, it was all dark. Wall also saw the ghost of a nun that evening walking around the graveyard looking as eerie as you may expect. After they told people about this story, some ghost hunters came forward and provided an explanation. Back in the 1300s, there was a monastery here. At this monastery, a monk had a relationship with a nun. This was found out and resulted in deadly punishment for both people. The nun got it particularly bad though, because she was bricked up alive in the convent walls and left there to die. The 1929 story was the big one that kicked everything off, but after this happened, other stories started emerging. Stories about this land before the rectory was even built. Apparently this area of land was always haunted and dealing with ghostly presences. Strange rapping sounds, bells ringing, objects moving and flying around without anyone touching them are all very common sights at the Borley Rectory. The ghost of this nun is also a regular character here, making herself known to newcomers quite often. You may even see the ghost coach. A headless phantom coach driver is said to be around the area and will approach people every now and again and take them away. Why anyone would ever get into a coach driven by a headless ghost is beyond me, but apparently it happens. Everything about this rectory and land is evil, and it needs to be avoided. And finally, number 1 on this list is Nidaros Cathedral. This is not only Norway's most important cathedral, but also one of the most haunted as well. I mean, in all honesty, it literally looks like Dracula's castle if Dracula's castle was a cathedral. It was constructed in the 1300s, but the actual hauntings didn't begin until relatively recently in its lifetime. In 1924, Bishop Mary Gleditch saw something pretty scary and gruesome. The ghost of a monk who had a massive slash directly across his neck. Ever since that day, this monk is seen very regularly. Nobody knows why though. People and historians have looked through the history of this cathedral and can't seem to find any record of a big monk population ever staying here. However, it doesn't make sense that this random monk ghost would just show up out of nowhere, so you have to imagine that he was here at some point before. You also have to imagine that he got that cut on his neck here too. All of it is very dark and mysterious and makes you wonder what else happened here that wasn't documented. 5 on this list is Hallstatt Carner. Hallstatt Carner is one weird church, man, let me tell you. I'm all about unique and cool decorations, but human body parts? Kind of where I draw the line, guys. Discovery.com says, many bone churches and ossuaries are decorated with femurs and pelvises, but at Hallstatt Carner, these skulls themselves are decorated. More than 600 of the skulls on display in this benhouse, also known as bone house in English, bear their former owners' names, professions, and the date of their death. Many are also adorned with decorative garlands and flowers. But perhaps what makes this bone church stand out the most is the fact that the most recent remains to be interred here belong to a woman who passed away in 1983 after having requested the benhouse as her final resting place. What's more, she might not be the last because the church is still open to receiving similar requests. So yeah, the dark secret here is that there is literal bones still being added. 1983 is really not that long ago when you think about it, and like the article suggests, that's probably not the last person to have been thrown into this array of skeletons. I guess it isn't, but it feels like this should be illegal or something. At the very least, it's just super weird. Like, why is a bunch of dead bodies and bones and stuff bringing anyone closer to God? Isn't the whole point of church to connect with your spiritual side? Not get grossed out by a bunch of dead people who you might have even known at one point. The church church is located in Austria and has got to be one of the scariest churches in that country for sure. Unless you want your bones to be added to some religious display, I would stay away from this place. Number 4 on this list is the St. Louis Cathedral, a beautiful church like many on this list, which is riddled with spirits. List first says, like the city it serves, the St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans is a font of strange myths and legends. Originally built by the city's French rulers, the modern cathedral wasn't completed until the 1850s. According to lore, the ghosts of the old structure came along for the ride. One of the cathedral's better known ghosts, Père Dagobert, was an 18th century priest. Dagobert was renowned for his kindness, especially his willingness to treat the poor and terminally ill. During the 1760s, several members of his congregation decided to revolt against the city's new Spanish rulers. The mainly French and Creole rebels successfully pushed the initial Spanish force out of the city, but a larger force later managed to claim New Orleans for the Spanish king. Infuriated by the earlier rebellion, Irish-Spanish governor Alejandro O'Reilly decided to not only execute the rebels, but also leave their rotting bodies on the doorstep of the St. Louis Cathedral. As a devout Catholic, Dagobert could not stand by while Catholic bodies were so roughly treated. After failing to get O'Reilly's permission to properly bury the bodies, Dagobert led a funeral procession down to St. Peter's Cemetery and placed the slain men in unmarked graves. Dagobert's successor, a Spanish priest named Pierre Antoine, is also said to haunt the cathedral. More intriguingly, Antoine's friend, voodoo priestess Mary Laveau, who often prayed at the church during her lifetime, is also considered to be one of the many spirits inside the cathedral. So we got voodoo priestesses, unmarked haunted graves, multiple spirits of bodies that were buried improperly. This church is just one big mess. Many people think that there are also a bunch of other secrets that this place has that we don't know about. Like this was a spot for a secret society hundreds of years ago who performed some very questionable rituals, and that's why this place is as haunted as it is. Whatever really happened here, we know it was dark and we know that it left its mark. Number 3 on this list is the Church of Agia Theodora of Vasta. This church is located in Greece and is one of the most unique churches you will ever see. Sticking out of this tiny Byzantine church's roof is 17 holly and maple trees. These are sizable trees as well and grow over 30 meters tall. There are 2 versions of how this church got its ghostly presence, and they're described well by Greeker than the Greeks. They write, coming from a family of only girls, Theodora, to save her father from having to join the army, disguised herself as a boy and joined up. Not long after joining the army, a local girl, believing Theodora to be a boy, and when Theodora, for obvious reasons, rejected her, the girl, out of revenge, claimed she was pregnant by Theodora and demanded they be married. For reasons known only to Theodora, she did not reveal her secret, which could have saved her, and refused to marry and was consequently put to death. Version 2 is more or less the same, only this time, Theodora, again disguised as a boy, joined a monastery as a monk. Why she didn't save herself trouble and join a nun's monastery is not known, but anyway, a nun from a nearby monastery fell in love with the monk Theodora, the ending then being the same. Before her execution, Theodora prayed, "Let my body become a church, my blood a river, and my hair the trees." On the very spot where Theodora was executed, a spring gushed forth and grew to become a river which still exists today, as the river which flows beneath the tiny church. So guys, if that legend holds true, then not only is this church haunted by a ghost, but the actual church itself is a ghost. This whole thing was made up by the spirit of Theodora and therefore is basically a living church. Locals have said that because of this reason, the water that flows through this river has some exceptional healing properties and can cure many ailments. Considering this church may actually be the spirit of a person who has passed, I highly recommend saying a prayer before you enter. Number 2 on this list is the Templo Mayor ruins. So a church is typically defined as a place for Christian worship, but if we loosen up the definition a little bit and just make it a building or landmark where people would have worshipped higher beings, then the Templo Mayor ruins can certainly qualify. This temple is one of the most haunted places in Mexico, and for good reason. Gaurav Gupta writes, "This archaeological site in Mexico has a blood-soaked past. It is a haunted Aztec civilization site that has made its presence felt through the time. Around 4,000 people were brutally killed to please Aztec gods. The priests would cut out the beating hearts from the victim's chest and then throw their lifeless bodies on the stairs of the Aztec temple. Aztec's last emperor made his last stand against invading Spanish armies before he was tortured and killed. This Aztec is now a museum, and tourists report strange, sensational feelings and sightings of shadow figures. 4,000 people were likely sacrificed here. That is just an insane number of people to have died over the years. Not to mention the fact that a battle took place here, and that would have caused more loss of life in great numbers. Needless to say, the spirits of those that passed have never really left. Glowing orbs are always spotted at this place, especially in the evening. Some people have also felt contacted by the dead before. Like they go into a deep trance and get a vision of something to come or something happening in a totally other life. From my research, they've had a hard time explaining it, but they know that something paranormal has touched them. Some locals have even noted a bright light flashing up into the sky at this place before. It happens very infrequently and doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to it, but every now and again you can spot a beam of light blast into the sky. I don't think it's unbelievable to think that this place is deeply haunted with all of the death that's happened here. From my reading, it seems to be decently safe to visit if you go during the daytime, but I'd still say a prayer to those that were lost here. And finally, number 1 is the Chapel of the Dead. This one is really interesting because it's actually a crypt underneath a big church. The Chapel of the Dead, or the Capuchin Crypt, is located in Italy, and it's underneath the Santa Maria della Concenzo dei Cappuccini Church. This church is located in Rome and was built in the 1600s. The church itself wouldn't be haunted if it wasn't for the 3,700 skeletal remains that are found underneath it. Yeah, that's right folks, this Chapel of the Dead has a bunch of dead in it. The remains of these dead are everywhere along the walls and represent different rooms of this underground chapel. There are 6 different rooms that comprise this chapel, and they are as follows: Crypt of the Resurrection, the Mass Chapel, Crypt of the Skulls, Crypt of the Pelvises, Crypt of the Leg Bones and Thigh Bones, and Crypt of the Three Skeletons. Crypt of the Pelvises, guys, that's an actual thing. I feel like I don't need to go into detail about what sort of remains hang along the walls in that room, but yeah, that's an actual thing. And listen to what Wikipedia writes about the last room, the Crypt of the Three Skeletons. The center skeleton is enclosed in an oval, the symbol of life coming to birth. In its right hand it holds a scythe, symbol of death, which cuts down everyone like grass in a field, while its left hand holds the scales, symbolizing the good and evil deeds weighed by God when he judges the human soul. A placard in 5 languages declares. Obviously, with all this being said, this place is deeply haunted. It sounds like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie, and from what locals have said, it definitely could be. Severe bad luck can befall those that enter into this chapel, and it seems to be totally random. I could enter it and be like 100% fine, but you could enter it and just have horrible things happen to you for years. It's a really interesting place to read about, but definitely not the sort of place I'd recommend visiting.
In 5th, we have the Most Holy Trinity Church in New York, built sometime between 1882 and 1885 on land that previously served as a graveyard until 1853. According to local rumors, not all of the bodies residing there were exhumed from the graveyard, and the spirits of those left behind still inhabit the grounds to this day. The church property covers an entire city block, and it is said that there are false closets leading to bricked up doorways, tunnels, and random sub-basements throughout the church and convent. There are also mysterious passageways on the upper levels of the church, where legend says only priests are able to enter. The church's rectory was built in 1872 by its second pastor, Monsignor Michael May, who later passed in his room on the 2nd floor. Priests who live in the rectory have used that space for mainly a guest room ever since, as no one has ever been willing to live in it on an ongoing basis. Guests have experienced lights being switched off and on, hearing strange noises, and the sound of a person walking back and forth while trying to sleep. Phantom footsteps have also been heard on the staircases in the building, and dogs who were once kept as pets in the rectory would stare in a trance-like state down the basement stairs, as well as into the dining room when the building got cold. In 1897, a parish bell ringer named George Stull's life was taken in the vestibule of the church. Though there was a suspect in the case, a former parishioner who would later be executed for an unrelated ending of life, no one was ever convicted of the crime. The red fluids of Mr. Stull's, as well as the red handprint of the killer, is believed to still be on the wall in a stairway leading to the bell tower. George's ghost still roams the church and is believed to be the reason why the bells will ring suddenly, vowing not to leave until his death has been solved. Moving on to our 4th place position, we have the Aquia Church of Stafford, Virginia. While the congregation was established in 1711, the physical parish wasn't built until 1751. It was a gorgeous brick building built on a peaceful hilltop with a 2-story crucifix floor plan, which otherwise known as a cruciform, which was considered a rather unusual style for colonial churches. Aquia was built to replace 2 earlier sites of the Overwharton parish, which were constructed around 1680. The inside of the church burned down in 1754 and was not rebuilt until 1757. It was then shut down from the Revolutionary War until the Civil War due to lack of funding, before reopening as a stable, campsite, and hospital for Union forces. It was during this closure that a young blonde woman was traveling the dark country roads, rural Stafford County, when a group of highwaymen accosted her. This time period was full of exasperated uncertainty from the war, and with it a severe lack of resources, food, and money. Men would wait hidden on the side of roads to steal the valuables from people walking or riding by their hiding spots. She ran from the men to the sanctuary of the church, but was only able to hide for a little while before they broke inside and ended her life. Her body was hidden in the tower, and the men were never caught. It wasn't until after the Revolutionary War ended in 1775 and the church was ready to reopen for services that what was left of her was discovered, a skeleton with golden blonde hair that was as intact as if she had been freshly slain. The red fluid that spilled on the floor from her death was impossible to remove. Despite using every trick known to man, the stains remained in the tower for well over 100 years, until during a modern renovation when the redness was covered up by concrete. With the facility still being in use today, members of the church have mentioned hearing footsteps walking around at all hours of the day and will break into a frantic run around the church at night, but no one is there. Noises can be heard in the empty tower, with some saying it sounds like a struggle, others describing a groan, whistle, or even a call for help. Many have also mentioned seeing a transparent woman in the church's windows, on the balcony, or even in the graveyard, dubbing her Blonde Beth after the hair of the skeleton. In the 1900s, brave people would try to stay overnight at the church, but were chased away by what they described as an unfriendly presence. A custodian working in the graveyard saw a ghostly woman's face floating above the graves, while another man saw a woman smiling at him through the balcony windows before she vanished. In the middle of this creepy sandwich,
Number 2 on this list is the Church of St. Mary the Virgin. This church is located in Bedfordshire, England, and can very easily be a hiding spot for the devil. Bedfordshire Live says, the Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Clop Hill, Bedfordshire was abandoned for about 170 years after it fell into disuse in the 1840s. During this time, the church fell into ruin as it lost its roof and became a focal point for vandalism, antisocial behavior, and, according to ghost hunters, black magic. Over the years, many people have reported seeing strange things near this church, from mysterious hooded monks to tall dark figures. The 14th century church was reportedly used for satanic rituals in the 1960s. As rumor has it, bones were dug up and arranged in satanic patterns. Damien Odell, head of the Anglia Paranormal Investigation Society, theorizes that the hauntings are what remain of black magic rituals from many years ago. He explained, there's definitely something strange going on at the church, and my personal view is that it's down to black magic practices held there. I think it's possible for a group of Satanists to conjure up something and leave it behind. A sort of guardian or elemental. He added, if this is the case, it certainly does its job because it frightens the living daylight out of people. Other theories speculate that it's haunted because it's facing the wrong way. Churches traditionally face east, the direction from which the sun rises, which is associated with the location of heaven. However, because St. Mary the Virgin faces away from God, it's said to have opened up its doors to hell. Many locals have thought that this church is the literal church of the devil because of all the sightings and the fact that it's facing towards hell rather than where it should be facing. Even if it isn't the devil that is here, it's clear that there is some sort of demonic presence for sure. Personally, I would avoid this church at all costs if I was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is Egg Hill Church. Egg Hill Church is one of the creepiest and scariest churches on this list, and it's for good reason. The church is located in Pennsylvania and has seen a horrifying atrocity committed there in the past. Before I even get into the tragedy tragedy that went down here, let's just take a look at this place and how creepy it is. It's this small barn-looking structure that doesn't look to be in good repair at all. It's got a few gravestones sitting out front of it, and it's relatively in the middle of nowhere. It looks like the sort of place where a serial killer would be lurking, or in this case, maybe even the devil. In the early 1900s, this place hosted a horrifying mass murder. The pastor of this church held a congregation, gathering everyone in the surrounding areas to this church. When they were all inside, he chained the door shut and murdered everyone. He wasn't just interested in his visitors though, because right after he was done with that, he took his own life as well. This was obviously a major shock to the community when it happened, but even to this day, it's left people baffled. The pastor apparently never showed this sick and sadistic nature in his character before, and this act of terror came out of thin air. That's why people have speculated before that he may not have been acting by himself. It's very possible that it was him in the flesh, but not in the mind. That his body was simply acting as a vessel for the devil or another spirit as they did this. To this day, locals avoid this place and claim that there is a dark force that haunts it. Maybe it's the devil just sitting, waiting in this church for his next helpless victim to wander inside. On this list is the Templo Mayor ruins. So a church is typically defined as a place for Christian worship, but let's loosen up that definition just a little bit and start thinking about it as a building or landmark where people would have worshipped higher beings. If we start thinking about it like that, then the Templo Mayor ruins can certainly qualify. Mexico has a lot of haunted spots, but this is at the top of their list for sure. Gaurav Gupta writes, this archaeological site in Mexico has a blood-soaked past. It is a haunted Aztec civilization site that has made its presence felt throughout the time. Around 4,000 people were brutally killed to please Aztec gods. The priests would cut out the beating hearts from the victims' chests and then throw their lifeless bodies on the stairs of the Aztec temple. Aztec's last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, made his last stand invading Spanish armies before he was tortured and killed. This Aztec is now a museum, and tourists report strange sensational feelings and sightings of shadow figures. 4,000 people were likely sacrificed here. That is a truly absurd amount of sacrifices. Then throw on the fact that a great battle took place here, and you end up with so much death. Needless to say, the spirits of those that passed have never really left. Glowing orbs are always spotted at this place, especially in the evening. There have been reports of these glowing orbs touching the people and transporting them to the world of the dead. They go into a hypnotic state and can't move, sort of like what happens to people in the latest season of Stranger Things, if any of you have watched that. They have a very hard time explaining what has happened to them after the fact, but they know that it was the dead. This is accompanied by a giant beam of light that flashes into the sky. There is evil here, there just has to be. All of the death that has transpired over the years has left a horrible stain on this place, and evil has congregated here. No one knows what type of evil or what spirit is behind this, but just know that this is a scary place that you should probably avoid. Number 4 on this list is the Ness Church. Ness Church is a Norwegian church that is no longer operating. It's a collection of ruins now and a very popular spot for ghost hunters. The ghost hunters have discovered that electronic equipment or your standard cell phone isn't going to do so hot in this church. For whatever reason, the second that you bring anything like that in, it just completely shuts down. If one wants to have an electronic device here, then it needs to be specifically made to withstand strong spiritual energy. The most popular myth surrounding the ghostly presence that resides here is a priest named Jacob Christian Finnegan. This was a priest who presided over this church from 1800 to 1837. Apparently, he suffered a very grim fate here along with his children. It's thought that he and his children were killed by an evil gang who came through the church looting it. They killed the priest and then, ever so cruelly, bricked his children up and left them to die. This is only one variation of the tale though, because one legend actually says that the priest did this to his kids himself. Regardless of which one is historically accurate, they're both pretty bad. The screams of these children are frequently accompanied by the sighting of this priest. It's said that he will stalk those who come here and follow them around, giving them a horrible horribly uneasy feeling. It's very likely that if you go by yourself, this ghostly priest will attack you and could do some serious damage. Maybe he wasn't evil when he was alive, but he certainly is now.
In third place, we're taking a closer look at St. Mary the Virgin, located on the outskirts of Clophill, England. Originally built facing the west sometime around the year 1350, it's believed to have been erected on top of a leper hospital run by monks. I'd like to take a moment to note that it was built in the quote-unquote wrong direction, with churches traditionally facing east, the direction from which the sun rises, which is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah in Christian religion. Altars inside of these holy buildings would face in the eastbound direction for prayers. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin faces away from God, it thus opens its doors to hell, and ergo responsible for the tale I'm about to tell. The building was abandoned in 1848 when the rector at the time made the decision to have a new church built, instead of expanding the previous one, which was much needed due to the rapidly growing congregation. Old St. Mary's, as was dubbed by the locals, was then primarily used as a mortuary chapel, holding bodies before they were buried in the adjacent cemetery. By the 1950s, St. Mary's had become so run down that it could no longer fulfill that use, with just the outdoor walls and tower remaining. In March 1963, the tomb of an 18th century apothecary's wife was broken into, and the bones were arranged ritualistically in the middle of the church. And once again on Midsummer's Eve of 1969, multiple women's graves were broken into, with bones being removed and rearranged once more. While the specific individuals involved in these acts were never identified, the arrangements found resembled those used in black mass rituals performed by satanic groups at the time. After the first incident in 1963, a rare decision was made to rehollow, or in more simple terms, re-bless the altar that was left in the building, in a failed attempt to protect the building from evil. Later that year, Reverend Harold Colthurst reported stumbling upon a group of men in the building that were in the midst of a mysterious ritual, being quoted as saying that the men were trying to communicate with evil spirits, chanting some sort of mumbo-jumbo. They were definitely in league with the devil. Modern-day visitors to the now landmark have reported seeing a plethora of ghostly figures during the day and nighttime, faint lights moving about before vanishing mysteriously, along with reports of a chilly and oppressive atmosphere even during warm days. In second place, we're visiting l'Abbaye de Mortimer, or Mortimer Abbey. It was originally built in 1134 on land gifted by King Henry I. The stagnant water of the drainage lake, which was dug out by the monks to dry up the marshy land, was called Mortimer, or the Dead Pond, giving the monastery its name. Totally not ominous or anything. The monks constructed what was then one of the largest monasteries in the world on said land. The legend says that after the passing of his only son, King Henry wanted to reform his daughter Matilda and had her locked in a room in the abbey for 5 years. The anger and hate she felt from being sent away and isolated stained and seeped into the walls of the monastery, cursing it for eternity. After her eventual release, she went on to live until 1167, when it said her spirit returned to Mortimer Abbey to haunt the area as the White Lady. She is said to appear on nights close to a full moon, moaning as she drifts through the now ruins of the monastery. Those that have seen her report that she alternates between wearing black and white gloves. If she appears to you with white gloves on, you're destined for good luck. But if she appears with black, you'll be expected to pass within a year. Alas, Matilda is not the only spirit one must worry about if visiting the abbey. When the monastery was at its peak in the 1500s, a frail and suffering woman was brought to the monks with an illness it was believed that only they could aid. It was revealed that she was possessed by the spirit of a wolf and cursed to become a werewolf for several nights. The monks chained her to a room and conducted multiple exorcisms in an attempt to eradicate the spirit. The monks were able to exorcise the evil wolf spirit or demonic force out of the woman, but it then attached itself to the grounds and walls of the monastery. Several hundred years later, in 1884, a man named Roger Saboureau was hunting in the woods nearby when he was attacked by a large werewolf. He shot it multiple times, killing the creature, but when he returned home at dawn, he found the body of his wife bearing wounds matching those he had given the wolf. People say the spirit of Roger's wife and his own heartbroken spirit still wander the area when the moon is full. The abbey was exorcised by the church in 1921, but still remains haunted to this day. And coming in first place, we have the Abbey of the Black Hag, locally known as Monastery Galagduff. Please don't curse me for my pronunciation, St. Catherine's Abbey, or simply as Old Abbey. It's located roughly 2 miles east of the village of Shanagolden, in the townland of Old Abbey. Gee, can you tell where it got its name? One of the earliest recorded nunneries in Ireland, with its first official record being around 1298, it was built on land donated by John Fitzthomas, and has the typical layout for abbeys of its time, with a dining hall, cells, isolated meditation areas, and other rooms still able to be identified amongst the ruins today. During the 15th century, there was a major battle for supremacy in the area between the Earl Fitzgerald and the prestigious Butler family, of which the Earldom of Ormond belonged. It got to such an extent that the local bishop was known to pray for peace between the families at masses. During one of the nightly attacks, Earl Fitzgerald attempted to get his wife to safety, but as he was pulling her onto his horse, an arrow pierced her thigh, shattering the bone and spraying red bodily fluids. As he rode on, the Countess appeared to have succumbed to her injury, leading the Earl to seek sanctuary at St. Catherine's. The heartbroken man was certain his wife had passed, so he swiftly buried her beneath the altar and continued elsewhere to find safety. As the night went on, the nuns and residents began to hear hair-raising screams and made the decision to rebury the Countess in hopes of bringing her peace. When they dug up the body, they discovered her fingers were broken and her nails had been torn off. The poor woman had been buried alive, with a very slow and torturous end of her life. To this day, it is believed that the Countess has been unable to find peace and continues to scream in anguish, waiting for her husband to save her from a fate truly worse than death. Moving slightly ahead in time, we come to the Black Nun herself. Described as one in the order that wasn't content with being humble, helping others over herself, and the servitude to God, she instead craved power. The hag had her own cell, where she worshipped Satan and performed black magic, becoming a slave to the occult. This was the highest form of blasphemy in the church, and the other nuns in the order fled the abbey, while the hag remained in her now house of darkness. To complete her rituals, the Black Nun would venture into the local community and perform depraved, lewd acts and offer sacrifices, with bones of young community members later discovered on the grounds. In modern times, visitors have reported seeing the dark, shadowy figure of a nun wandering, the feeling of being constantly watched, and a disembodied hand reaching towards them. It has been reported that flashlights cannot function in the nun's cell, and modern batteries drain too quickly to have any sort of rational explanation.